The lies we told as teens, and how our parents totally saw through them. In back-to-back sentences, I asked my dad if he monitored our internet history, and if paying for things online showed up on his credit card statement. I was convinced I'd successfully passed these off as just two harmless, unrelated questions. My sister once tried to dramatically reveal to my parents that I'd been doing the deed with my partner since I turned 16. My mother responded with, "I know, I may be old, but I'm not deaf." I remember being in 3rd grade and discovering I could erase math problems from my math book. Yeah, Mum, the book came like that, with those massive empty spaces between the problems. God, I was an idiot. When I was in my high school, I'd smoke green herb and do the old towel under the door trick. Of course, my parents would call me out on it being there and would make comments, but I was pretty sure I had them tricked with the incense that I was burning. Then one day I must have pushed it too far by taking gravity pipe rips with my buddy. I hear a stern knocking on the door and an, "Open up, Derek, we need to talk." My friend and I, in our incredibly medicated state, were going, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." And in my genius, I stammered out, I can't. We're undressed." This is followed by an, "Oh?" We came downstairs awkwardly 30 minutes later, and my dad and I never spoke of that moment again. In short, my dad knows that I smoke green herb in bedroom with my friend. I turned the tables and make it more awkward for my dad to talk about it than it's worth. Okay, reading these others gave me the frickin' chills thinking back to when I was 13 to 15, and I had to whack it off all the time. I'd go into the bathroom, turn the fan on, turn music on, and act like I was going number 2 for 20 minutes, while I cranked it to a dirty birthday card my dad had gotten a few years prior. As if that wasn't obvious enough, when I actually did go number 2, I didn't turn the fan or music on, and it only took me 5 minutes. Gosh darn it, I'm not looking forward to talking to my parents next time. I typed in undressedwomen.com. Of course, I used the word beginning with N instead of undressed. Bloody YouTube. So I typed that into the family computer's search browser when I was like 9. Brother and Dad entered the room and I exited the page thinking that was that. Dad pulled up the history and found it, and I told them I meant to actually type in nuclear weapons, not NAAKD women, since I was into guns and stuff. They said okay, and I thought they bought it. Can't believe I was this frickin' dumb. See, Dad, I'm not looking at undressed women, I'm just researching how to commit the most deadly domestic terror attack on American soil ever. Honestly, I think some extremely conservative parents in the US would be alright with that trade-off, don't you think? When I was about 13 and discovered adult material online, I didn't know about internet history, so there were about 10 websites all under names of hotwomen.com or banging.com, and when my dad asked me what the F I was doing, I just came up with, "Oh, it's those stupid internet pop-ups." Every frickin' time. That's actually quite funny. My father pulled that one on me 3 days ago. I woke up in the morning, entered the living room, he tells me he's found something awesome on eBay, switches the screen from TV to PC, and I see women-on-women action going on. Those pop-ups are getting more and more ridiculous. Well, for me, my parents left every weekend from Friday, late Sunday to spend time on their property that they bought out in the country. Every weekend from the time I was 13. So naturally, my house became the party house for me and my friends. My parents would tell me, nobody can come over during this time. So my girlfriend would come over and stay the night. We'd have parties of more than 20 people in my quiet suburban house. Probably had the cops called around 5 to 8 times. I knew the main patroller's name and he knew my name and house. Every Sunday I'd clean like a madman the entirety of the house. I'd mop, I'd vacuum, I'd dust, I'd take out the trash, I'd dump hundreds of bottles of beer and booze in a public dumpster about 15 minutes away. I'd comb the yard for torn pieces of beer labels, bottle caps and stuff, and if someone threw up, I'd get shout and clean that sucker out. Only twice did I think I was caught. Once when my dad found a mixer with a preloaded Cosmo under the sink, which apparently some drunk girl had hid there. And then again when I'd mistakenly placed the table decoration in a completely wrong way on the table runner. For the Cosmo, I could claim ignorance and say it must have been the housekeeper who comes every other Friday. And for the second, I fessed up and said me and the boys played some poker on the long table while they were gone. No repercussions. Fast forward 4 years and I'm graduating college, talking with my parents, and I made the mention that I used to have some parties while they were gone. Occasionally, to which they laughed. "Yeah, we know you had parties. We got called probably 5 times by the cops and about 40 times from the frickin' Joneses, our neighbors, complaining about your parties. Plus, Bob, every Sunday we came back to the house and it was cleaner than when we left. Oy vey. That's probably why they never told you they knew. If you knew, you wouldn't have cleaned so well afterwards." My family's house was 3 stories tall, the top floor being one big room that spanned the length of the house. Me and my girlfriend at the time would have mad monkey bedroom fun all day, every day. It was right after high school and we were both unemployed. We'd try to be prepared, as in if someone were to come up, we had a blanket to throw over us and stuff. One day I was downstairs while she was on the 3rd floor and it sounded like the frickin' ceiling was caving in. I went back upstairs and asked her if she'd been jumping around or something, and she said she'd just been walking around. I realized then that my parents had definitely heard us effing every single gosh darn time. They never said a word or came upstairs. That reminds me of a good friend who told me she'd got rug burn on her back from having intense fun in her room, which was right above her parents'. Her parents wouldn't have even mentioned anything if the burn weren't sticking out from under her midriff top. They used it as an opener to say something like, "Honey, we hope he didn't hurt you. It sounded rougher than usual last night." I had a huge house party when my parents were gone. I moved all of the breakables into bedrooms and locked them so that nothing was broken or stolen. I took before photos so I'd remember how to arrange everything afterwards. When they returned, my mum was all, a few things seem off here. There were like some statues in a cabinet. In that moment, I thought I'd outwitted them, but they definitely knew. My brother and I got busted twice. First time, they said, "The house is too clean. You wouldn't have cleaned like this unless you had a party." Second, the house was averagely cleaned, but why are there muddy footprints on the windowsill in the living room? When I was at the tender age of 14, a rather aggressive girl took to me and she'd sneak over, sometimes without informing me she was coming over, while my parents were away. One day, we decided to go up to my treehouse where I used to read when I was younger. My dad came home early from work, the one freaking time in his life he ever did that, so he panicked. My treehouse was situated right over an alley with a good 12-foot drop over the fence into said alley. So she decided to jump out of the tree into the alley, forgetting her shoes in the process. I hadn't been in that treehouse for years, so I knew my dad would be suspicious if I just strolled out. There, under the blanket, was an old copy of The Hobbit, so I grabbed it and went in. Instead of just walking to my room like I should have, I decided to have a long, engrossing conversation with him about the plot of The Hobbit. To convince him that's why I was up there. Only thing is, I'd never read The Hobbit, but I knew my dad hadn't either, so I came up with the plot of The Hobbit right on the spot. It was no Tolkien, but I think my plot was pretty damn good. I came to find out years later in passing conversation with my mum that my dad in fact loved The Hobbit. He'd seen the girl jump out of the treehouse and listened to my fake retelling of The Hobbit because he was too awesome to care that I had a girl over. In short, came up with a fake plot for The Hobbit to convince my dad I wasn't with a girl in my treehouse. As a nerd, I'm appalled that you used our Lord and Savior Tolkien to cover up your sordid bedroom dealings, but as a formerly desperately hormonal teen, I kind of envy you. If only you were as good at describing the whims and limitations of Middle-earth eagle travel as you were at making girls fall in love with you. You'd be the king of both worlds. I stashed adult mags under the bathroom sink, with all of the cleaning supplies. Nobody will ever find them. I'm honestly shocked at how much they didn't know. I tell my mother stories now and she's horrified that she had no idea what I was up to. I was a terrible teenager, or maybe a great teenager depending on how you look at it. Attention, all teenagers who smoked, your parents knew. What sucks is when you don't smoke but your friends do. So sometimes I smell like cigarettes, or maybe I'll leave a butt or two on the porch, and telling my parents, no, I don't smoke cigarettes. It really just doesn't sound very convincing. I was brewing prison hooch. I innocently asked my mum, a biologist, how alcohol is made, and she explained in full detail the process of fermentation. I then asked if we had mason jars, then baking yeast. Then I started squeezing gallons of fresh orange juice. I had a friend refill the vodka in with water and put it back in the freezer. Frickin' idiot. My sister did this. Drank half a bottle of vodka, filled it up with water. My parents were more mad that she ruined the remaining half bottle of good vodka. I just thought of the most horrifying thing my dad has found. On our family computer, around age 13 or 14, I opened a Word document and typed everything that I'd do with a girl in the bedroom, and at the bottom I typed what I wouldn't do. The list of what I wouldn't do had, number 1, doing it in the vajayjay, and 2, butt licking. The list of what I would do had everything else, including doing it in the butt. As I'd later find out, I didn't save or close the document. I went into the computer room about 3 hours later to discover my masterpiece had been minimized on the bottom. My dad had been on the computer for at least 1 hour in between. At least they knew I wouldn't get a girl pregnant as a young teenager. I love how we do crap like this as kids. In case I forget later, here are the bedroom acts I am or am not willing to perform. Oh man, I wrote some song about chicks. Something about, we're gonna get some chicks, we're gonna lay their eggs in front of us, and a bunch of other lyrics that revealed I was woefully ignorant about human biology. I recorded it, of course, on my sister's cassette recorder, of course, and she played it for my parents, of course. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I drank a 6-pack of beer one time and put the caps back on. I told them the beer had evaporated. I'd sneak outside for a cigarette, put perfume on, and I was convinced they couldn't smell it. And I'd come home, blazed out of my mind, and tell them my eyes were red because of allergies. Middle of winter in Canada. Not much to be allergic to there. Right after high school, I skipped a year of college and started working at this restaurant. There were a couple of us out back smoking cigs when one of the younger hostesses said she had to go and asked what she should do about the smell. A friend handed her a bottle of perfume, and 5 of us watched in horror as she opened her mouth and sprayed it down her throat like a bottle of Benanca. That's when I knew this hostess might just be stupid enough to do the deed with me. Splooging in or on my socks and then putting them in my dirty clothes basket. Forgetting who washes my clothes. Having 3 boys, I think my mum had probably seen her fair share of specimen-covered socks and underpants, and for that reason alone, we as a family are more lenient when she talks during the football. My mom made me start doing my own laundry when I was 13, and I just realized why. Sorry, Mom. On-demand adult films. Hundreds of dollars worth. This was before the age of digital cable. We'd call a 1-800 number to unlock the adult movie channel for a block of time for a set price. After a few seconds, your cable box would flash a code like XX51. I forget the letters, but 51 was the unlocked channel. So I'd call it, crank it, and then finish. Then I'd call the cable company and ask, what is XX51 and why is it on my cable box? And they'd tell me, oh, you ordered that channel for 6 hours or whatever it was, and I'd say, no way, I'm the only one here and I'm only 14. They'd reblock the channel and take the charge off the bill. Every night I'd excuse myself from dinner early so I could tickle my pickle, and I'd announce to everyone, yeah, I'm really tired, so I'm just gonna hit the hay, don't disturb me. I really liked doing the cyber deed and rubbing one out in the process. I thought I was slick. In retrospect, I probably wasn't since the PC was in our family room. I'd also acquired a small collection of vibrating adult toys by the time I was 16 or so. I made the mistake of leaving one in the shower once, and it mysteriously ended up back on my desk. My parents never said a word. I smoked a lot of green herb all throughout high school. I'd come home with fire truck red eyes and eat half the food in the kitchen, but my parents never confronted me about it, so I thought I was so slick. About a year ago, I'm 24 now, I figured it had been long enough to let them in on my little secret. They just laughed and basically said, yeah, we knew, but you kept your grades up, so we let it go. Whoa, talk about the most chill parents in the world. If your grades were that high while you were on all of that wacky tobacco, were you actually some sort of genius until you dulled your brain back to just being pretty smart? I smoked a lot growing up too. I noticed a pattern where my mum would say I smelled like Mary J, and I'd react defensively, and she'd know. Inversely, one day she accused me of smelling like Mary J, to which I replied calmly, maybe it's because I just crapped my pants. That managed to perfectly diffuse the situation. I was really just dosed up on Mary J at the computer eating some Starbursts. My mum walks in, says hi, and asks what I'm eating. Look down at the candy, very confused. Okay, you've got this. It's strawberry flavored. It's called I'm eating Starberries. My mum stares at me. Okay, sweetie. Nailed it. I was not a good student in Hebrew school. When you did bad on a test, you had to get your parents to sign off on your exam. Well, I saw something on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that I thought might work. Basically, Will needed a signature on something and told his uncle that he could analyze his signature if he liked. So he got people to write their signatures on a piece of paper, and then when it was his uncle's turn, he lifted up the top sheet and made him write on the bottom sheet, which was his test that he needed signed. It worked on the show, so I figured why not try it in real life. And guess what? It worked. Playing Game Boy Color with the lights off after my parents left my room. I was such a rebel. That's the reason why I cranked it with my doors wide open, for everyone to see. Trust me, nobody wants to walk in on you tickling your pickle. I'd come home late at night with sunglasses on, thinking I was so smooth, now realizing just how frickin' stupid that was. When I first realized you could find pictures of undressed ladies on the internet, I asked my mum how to spell naked. I was sitting at the computer with what I shall assume was an air of anticipation about me. My dad grew tired with me spending so much time on the computer, so he bought a program called Kids Watch or something like that. Its purpose was to make it so I could only access my machine at certain times of the day, without a monthly time limit. So I used to just screw with the BIOS when I ran out of time, and he caught on eventually and passworded it. I thought I was pretty sneaky when I popped the CMOS battery out of the motherboard to reset the password, and continued to mess with the date settings to circumvent the child locks. But he probably knew. That's so much more clever than what I did. Our version was kid-proof, and it would put a timer on. We had 2 hours of computer time. At about 1 hour 59 into those 2 hours, I'd open everything I could. 12 Word documents, 14 browsers, 3 games, and then I'd hold down the power button. The computer wouldn't have enough time to save my used time to kid-proof, and then when the computer restarted, I had my 2 hours back. I thought I was hot stuff back then. Mine isn't very exciting. My mother would prepare all of these carefully arranged party trays of food for Christmas or Thanksgiving, and I'd eat as many of the delicious things as possible, and carefully arrange everything else a little further apart to cover my tracks. I would steal liquor from my parents' cabinet in high school. They didn't drink it, so it must have been fairly obvious to them when the bottles they'd get as gifts would work their way down from almost full to almost empty. I also had a bad habit of drunk dialing them when I went to college for the first month or so. They never said anything about that either. The only time I actually got a lecture was when I was downloading Porno on the family computer. It was in the mid-90s and the JPEG files had to have taken up a full 1/3 of the computer's paltry hard disk before my father started looking for what was eating up the valuable space. Lesson learned. I stored them on a zip disk instead. Next time you talk to your parents, I dare you to ask them this question. What did you do that you thought you'd covered up well but they actually noticed? And of course, report back here with stories. I'd do this, but I know that one of them would be about cranking it and I just couldn't take that. I'd sleep over at my ex's all the time, which my father would have flipped out about if he knew. So he'd ask me, the morning after, what time I'd gotten home the night before. I'd lie and say some outrageous time like 2 a.m. because I knew he was asleep then. He'd say okay and the topic would be over. I later came to realize my dad woke up before me for work, so he'd see my car wasn't in the driveway in the AM, making it obviously clear that I didn't come home. My situation was the opposite of this. Around that age, I spent a lot of time locked in my room, tying up the phone lines all night with a dial-up internet connection. They accused me of being some kind of adult website monger, when in reality, almost all of that time was spent learning things about programming, Linux, which ultimately got me the job that paid for college right out of school, and maintaining a long-distance relationship with the person I eventually married. And sure, sometimes I was whacking the mule, but not as often as the other things. You know, as much as you had a right to be offended by your parents' nosiness and accusations, you have to admit that with just about any other kid, they would have been right on the money. Most of us were using our family PCs for evil. I've told this story many times. One day when I was about 16, after an exhausting day at a forensics tournament, a couple of friends and I decided to smoke some herb at about 2 a.m. We didn't have a screen, so I grabbed one from underneath a sink in my bathroom. We loaded up the pipe and decided to hotbox my bedroom. We thought as long as we had the window wide open and blew our smoke out of it, all would be fine. After we were good and lit, I heard a knock at my bedroom door. My mum enters, asking if everything's okay. I chuckle and say, yeah, and she leaves. I thought, hell yeah, she didn't even know, and I turned back to my friend, who has a look of absolute horror on his face. He says something like, dude, she knew we were high. She was so mad. I didn't think she was mad, but after about 20 minutes, I thought I should go upstairs to my parents' bedroom, say hello, and test the waters. As an excuse to go up to their bedroom, I grabbed my copy of Dean Kunt's Intensity and one of those fortune teller fish. I thought my mum would like the book, and what better time to give it to her than 2:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I creep upstairs so I don't wake up my 10-year-old sister. I slowly open the door to my parents' room. It's pitch black and they're asleep. I tap my mum on the shoulder and I say, hey, I wanted to give this to you. And I hand her the book and the fish. She grabs them, puts them on the nightstand, and rolls over and goes back to sleep. I then left the room thinking she had no clue and that we'd gotten one by her. She freaking knew. The whole house had to have reeked like a ganja greenhouse, and my cotton mouth was so bad I couldn't get 2 words out without smacking my dry gums together. What are you doing, Johnny? Quickly minimized the adult website I had open on Internet Explorer 6. Oh, nothing, Dad, just reading up in Carter for my history project. You gotta see the speech they have. So cool. Okay. Don't waste much time though, son. Looking back, I'm sure glad that Dad didn't corner me about the smut I was definitely and obviously watching, even though he clearly knew. Dated other guys. I'm gonna go hang out with Amanda. I actually had a friend named Amanda, and my parents later told me they had a joke for it. Yeah, a man, duh.
Reddit, what's your deep web story? Disclaimer, I'll keep a lot of these stories lighthearted, but do keep in mind that the further you go into the dark web, the more stuff you'll find that will absolutely land you in prison. If you don't know what you're doing, stay off of the dark web. With that being said, please enjoy the video. The majority of these stories will all be the same, because they all come from people who downloaded Tor and went exploring or browsing. The vast majority have found the hidden wiki and clicked on some links. There is a fundamental misunderstanding here of what the dark web is designed to do. Those links from the hidden wiki and other point-and-click entry sites are designed to be found. The most obvious are the darknet markets. They want customers. They put their URLs out there. They list themselves on the wiki and other Tor directories. They don't want the sites to be hidden, just the owners/servers. If you were to go to one of the directories that crawls and links all the live URLs it can find, most of them will be listed as unknown. Some will take you to a site you can look at anyway, but a lot of them will take you to a page where it simply asks for your credentials before you can go any further. There's nothing else. No link to register, no FAQ, no indication of what is behind that password login. The whole idea of Tor's hidden services is that they are hidden from anybody who doesn't have the credentials to get into them. You have to get them in some other way. There's no referral links being spammed on Reddit or the Intel Exchange or general access forums. Some of these sites may be safe havens for dissidents to discuss stuff. Some of them might be the dark, spooky places of the no-sleep stories. But chances are, none of us will ever know what is behind 99% of them. TLDR, the stuff you will find by browsing the dark web is the stuff other people have found. While I personally never received anything from any deep web affiliated salesfolk, I did live with a roommate who would constantly receive the strangest brochures. At first, we'd receive brochures for like cruise lines and the like. I wrote it off as junk mail, but they came so frequently and they started getting stranger. Christian mingle brochures, petting zoo brochures, brochures for any and all services one can think of. I kind of felt like someone was gaslighting me, but I never said anything, and the brochures would disappear as quickly as they came, so I didn't have time to stress it. Until one day I walked in, and my roommate was delicately cutting into a brochure and pulling out a small baggie of powder. The dude had hooked up with the most low-key dealer I'd ever seen. Oh man, the stealth that some deep web dudes come up with is legendary. Low-key stealth? Comic book, still in the plastic ceiling, perfectly legit except the entire back page directly inside the cover was a sheet of acid. Super low-key stealth? A CD in a case, plastic sealed, played great music, looked totally ordinary, until you peeled back the case artwork and noticed that there was some SID tucked away in there. Almost flew under the radar and almost got thrown out stealth? Junk mail. I kid you not. Looked like a straight business-sized envelope, opened it up, official-looking bullcrap similar to what you'd see in regular old junk mail, until you noticed that the envelope had a hidden flap on the inside where there was, guess what, acid. I'm not kidding when I say the guy almost threw out the entire thing until he decided to make sure and tore the thing apart. That's not even talking about how some folks get away with powders, pills, and other type things. Collectible Pez dispensers already filled with pills, but looks like it's never even been opened, complete with the actual candy and original packaging as well. They're creative dudes, I swear. Obviously a throwaway. This is from way back, when Silk Road 1 was still going strong. I was looking for a certain substance, but couldn't find it in my part of the world for a decent price. Posted my request on the forum, and after a few days, someone messages me with an offer. For some reason, I accepted it and sent him around $200. Of course, I got scammed. I didn't think much of it, but posted a warning to others about this guy, saying he scammed me out of $200. A few days later, I get a message in my inbox saying something like this. Hey, I'm a vendor and this guy tried to scam me too. He just ordered an ounce of MDMA from me, and an ounce of sweet sugar crystals are on the way to his mailbox. Please send me your BTC address and I will send you the $200 he scammed you out of. The next day, I had my $200 back and a deep respect for the dark web community. TLDR, guy scams me out of $200, someone else scams him of $700 and refunds me my money. And for the record, yes, he meant literal sugar crystals. It wasn't drug jargon. Back when internet relay chat was on its way out and peer-to-peer was in its infancy, I tried to download The Sims via a private FTP. The guy I downloaded from found a Trojan on my computer and walked me through how to remove it. I would take a bullet for that dude. Silk Road, circa 2013. Purchased what was promised as a, quote, mind-blowing experience. Received a dustbuster 2 days later. Strangely, no complaints on my end. There was a German man selling pretzels. Just pretzels. I feel like this is a great way to add a layer of mystique to your product if you're a pretzel maker. Pretzels so good they can't be sold in stores. Pretzels so good they're listed alongside the experimental drugs. Way back in the day, beyond the terms of a statute of limitations, you used to be able to use Kazaa and LimeWire and stuff to look at people's entire computers, since they were stupid and set the entire computer to share. I used to send out an email a day to random people, pointing out that the pictures of them screwing their husband/wife/girlfriend, etc., and their social security number were freely available, along with instructions on how to uninstall Kazaa/LimeWire. DIY vasectomy kit on Silk Road. It was a kit of weird dentist tool-looking hooks and some tube thing. $20. The best thing about Am I the Genius is that you don't have to go to sketchy websites or risk getting arrested to subscribe to the content. Same goes for Am I the Jerk too, linked in the description below. Remember to like the video, subscribe, and thanks for watching. Found someone selling a, quote, wish pill online. Basically, you take the pill, make a wish, and it's supposed to make it come true. It just made me laugh how much they were trying to sell it off as something real. They made up fake elements that were supposedly found in nature and showed videos of them, quote, making the pill, which was really just a bunch of blue lights being flashed at the screen. They were selling it for $100 a pill. Sad thing is, there were probably a few idiots who actually bought it. Got bored about 4 years ago and wanted to see what I could find. Lots of tables with seemingly useless information, people selling drugs, people screwing animals, and vice versa. Found a few white supremacist sites, and lots of cheese pizza. Honestly, it's not as exciting as a lot of people make it out to be. There are plenty of, quote, hitmen, but I'm guessing 90% of them are cops or a scam. If you are looking to get arrested, there are CP links everywhere. A lot easier to find than I had expected, but I never actually looked at them. Plenty of drugs, some guns. There's plenty of snuff, but you can find snuff on Reddit, so it's not anything special. Overall, I wasn't looking to get arrested, so I didn't do anything besides browse the hidden wiki. Fun story, I used Tor in middle school to get past the websites that were blocked so I could play Congregate. You had to enable Flash for it to work because obviously you needed to play Flash games, but you aren't supposed to enable Flash on Tor because it allows you to be traced. I didn't really care though because I was only using it for Congregate. I miss Congregate. I miss it so bad. I wish Flash games were real again. This was back before Google. Web pages were, for the most part, still very basic HTML with JavaScript. Hardly anyone used CSS. Only discussion boards and some banking sites had anything approaching mature front-end/back-end combinations. Real deep web story, not just one about illicit activities online. I was browsing random blogs, GeoCities sites, and the like, just going from link to link. Eventually, I came upon an odd page. It appeared to be random thoughts from different people, but for the time, it was very well designed. The messages seemed to be cryptic in nature, like several people trying to pass secret notes. I started through the source, and hidden in the comments of a JavaScript were various IP addresses. I gathered all the IPs in a text file and began enumerating. Some were routers with banner messages I could telnet to, almost all at universities. Quote, warning, this is a secure system at University of blah blah. The default Cisco credentials from back in the day worked on most of them, but I didn't poke around. A few of the IPs were web browsers with little to nothing on them, mostly Apache on Linux or some BSD, at least one IIS server I can recall. I finally came upon a web server with a huge directory of HTML files and TIFF images, with a few smaller subdirectories containing the same. NSLOOKUP returned no reverse records for the IP. A visual route traced it as far as Colorado. The HTML files appeared to be records a psychologist or similar mental health professional would keep. The images were of faxes, apparently of both military and medical nature. As I browsed from a subdirectory back to the parent, at the top of was a new HTML file named something like 1-hellothere.html. The timestamp was from right that minute. I opened it, and in plain text was the message, quote, "We see you." No quotes, all lowercase. About 15 seconds later, the server dropped. Got it at a friend's urging. Was on it for a while until I stumbled onto a site dedicated to random animal facts. It had no design or anything. It was just black text on a white background listing off animal factoids. I was on it for a good 30 minutes before going, "The heck am I doing?" and uninstalled Tor. I saw someone offering a cure for herpes on Agora. When the drugs arrive and you look in the mail and the only thing going through your head is, "Holy crap, I can't believe there are drugs in my mailbox that someone shipped me." It's a high in and of itself. One day, I entered one of the deep web sites and found a lot of ebooks. The end. I was 19 and wanted to buy a fake ID, but found out that you had to buy Bitcoin and I didn't feel like figuring it out, so I gave up. This was maybe a year or so before Bitcoin blew up. I could be living on the moon right now, but I didn't feel like it. Yeah, about that. I'm gonna have to have you Google crypto crash real quick. I decided to check out one of the successor sites soon after the Silk Road was busted. They had 2 or 3 crappy-looking guns for several $1,000s apiece, some weed, and a metric crapload of weird research drugs. I was hoping to see things I might recognize, like cocaine or heroin or LSD, but instead, I got random mixes of letters and numbers in various pills or powders. It was a lot less exciting than I thought it would be. Downloaded Tor, went to the hidden wiki, went to the Silk Road, wasn't interested in drugs, found a quote, saxaphone, was just a saxophone, found a template for counterfeiting Gucci products, considered selling Gucci products, found counterfeit medical degrees, considered buying one for 999 Bitcoin, realized that was over $50,000. Found a guy selling carrots. Like, it wasn't code for anything, he was literally just selling carrots for Bitcoin. 10 out of 10 would visit again. I was a part of the no-love deep web alternate reality game where we had to do a deep net scavenger hunt, which culminated in me driving to New York to answer a payphone at 3 a.m. That was cool. I once found a forum dedicated to sharing recordings of the automated messages that tell you the next stop on trains. People would post the recordings that they presumably made themselves, and then they would discuss them. It haunts me to this day. I have so many questions. When I was a freshman in high school, my best friend and I were very into the whole deep web thing. We had Tor and we would exchange onion ports that we had discovered and would explore them together. We saw some weird crap. Right off the bat was a site for a professional hitman, which we decided was definitely run by the FBI. We discovered a series of, quote, chans, or deep web 4chan clones. Some of those were very weird, and some of what we saw was definitely illegal. We were fascinated with those in particular because, of course, we were both ridiculous/B users at the time. Lots of disturbing and violent adult images, lots of gore, sometimes the two overlapped. We tended to stay away from that stuff. It was a pretty big buzzkill. Finding the Silk Road was cool, even though we didn't ever buy anything. Probably the weirdest stuff I ever found were the personal ads. There were bulletin boards where people would just ask to do the most deviant, incomprehensible crap to someone, or vice versa. I think about the Craigslist killer when I remember those things, and wonder how many of those people actually end up acting out those fantasies. Okay, bear with me on this one. I was in the midst of a deeply depraved self-pleasure session once when I saw a thumbnail of a chick smack dab in the middle of a giant dude circle. Thinking it was a typical gangbang, I clicked on it, because why not? What did I have to lose? I was experiencing a pretty ridiculously long dry spell at the time, and was pretty dang lonely. I had done the deed to the chick for the Education Connection commercials just a few days earlier, so it wasn't like it would usher me into a new realm of perversion. Anyways, I clicked on the link expecting a gangbang, but what I found was instead much more shocking. It started out as a typical one, chick playing with herself while a bunch of dudes watched on and slowly stroked it. But then, things got weird. None of the dudes banged her. Instead, there was a glass jar that was being passed around that everyone shot into. Everyone. Like 40 dudes shot in this jar. Then it finally made its way to a dude in a chef's uniform. He came out of nowhere, pun probably completely intended, and he added the white sauce to pancake batter and made pancakes. The dude made white sauce cakes. Anyways, the chick eats the white sauce cakes while everyone watches, and the weirdest adult film I've ever seen comes to a strange, uncomfortable end. Needless to say, it was very difficult to pleasure myself to. Found out about it when Silk Road 1 got shut down, so decided to check it out and found Agora. Spent a lot of time setting up an account and decided to finally buy something, so I bought a gram of MDMA, and it all worked perfectly. Then started buying more for myself, then started buying some for friends. The next thing I know, I'm ordering ounces of MDMA at a time and thousands of LSD tabs, and pretty much every drug you can think of, plus a bunch you've never heard of. I was moving all this stuff faster than I could buy it as well, really stupidly might I add. Ended up realizing that this was going to either end by me quitting or me behind bars, so I quit while I was ahead. Ended up with over $10,000 profit and a nice little stash for myself. Bought a trip to Europe and never touched the deep web again. Had about 1,000 empty gel capsules left over, so filled a bunch of them up with glitter and gave them away so people could enjoy having their crap covered in glitter. In computer science, we often got bored and screwed around. One day, we ran into the deep web. The most disturbing site we found was a comprehensive guide for cooking women. We're not talking about a short joke here. This page had information on what body types to use for specific cuts, how to prepare these cuts, and how to cook the girl so she lives as long as possible. It horrifies me that people way worse than the freaks on Criminal Minds exist. I first learned about the deep web back in grade 10 when this really strange druggy kid in my grade was going on about it. We sat together in English and had a new teacher that wasn't quite good and didn't really know how to control the class, so the last 20 minutes or so, she would just let us do whatever. Everyone around this kid's desk, let's call him Eli, would crowd around his computer and watch him monkey around on Silk Road and other weird sites he found. No CP or anything, but drugs and hitmen and weird crap in general. I was kinda sketched out by it, so I tried to avoid looking at it all, but I listened and it was pretty screwy. Eventually, Eli decided to order drugs from some site. This was high school, so we all lived at home, so he figured he'd order DMT to his cottage, go up for a weekend, and pick it up to hide in his closet. So we typed in his address to some guy, worked out the details, and waited. Went up to his cottage the next weekend, and we all waited for his return for the stories. Eli got back, and we all ran up to him to ask if it worked. He said it didn't, and he was really mad since he had already paid the guy. He complained to whoever was selling him the drugs, and the guy was really understanding and said he'd send an even bigger package to his cottage. Eli went up the next weekend. Still nothing. The guy was very apologetic and said he'd send one more. Still nothing. Eli gave up and figured it was just a guy trying to make a quick buck. He gave up on the deep web, and that was that. Months later, he goes up to his cottage with his family and has a big dinner party with the whole complex of cottages. He's schmoozing around and overhears these elderly people talking about going to the cops. He asks why, and they tell him. They've been consistently getting shipments of drugs every week. Eli had typed in the wrong address, and the guy he was talking to had been sending more and more to the wrong people each week because he felt so bad. He was so sketched out that he quit everything and now is doing quite well for himself. Proud of him. Was on it once. Saw the usual drugs and whatnot. Then, I happened to stumble onto a blog with a non-working link that I could not confirm, but apparently, before the link stopped working, it used to be a website where you could buy human organs. Now, that doesn't seem too messed up until the blog was talking about its context. The way they got the organs was by having a team of doctors and assistants go out onto the streets to kidnap homeless people. They would put the homeless people in cages, kill them, then cut them up and sell their organs. They said their justification was that homeless people won't be missed and the police would not come looking for them. I can't confirm the validity of this website, but that is the most messed up thing I somewhat stumbled upon on the dark web. Scary stuff. Throwaway, 'cause illegalness. I was big into Bitcoin when the Silk Road thing happened, and I got into buying certain merchandise online. The first time I was very nervous about the potential of getting caught, so I decided to have the first product sent to my office. I had it addressed generically to the IT department, and my boss, who was a good friend, was going to keep an eye out on it for me. I figured this would give me enough deniability if it was intercepted. Things went very wrong. It came in, and instead of the package going to my boss, it went to his boss. Now, the company I worked for at the time is a very large behemoth with access to credit information on just about everyone in the US. Every employee is drug tested, and we have random tests. This would be a huge issue. So, I was at lunch when the package was delivered and opened. I was actually coming back when I got a call from the project manager. "Hey, so, did you have anything sent to the office?" "No, nothing. Why?" "Duh, not going to admit to this." "Nothing strange sent here?" "No." "Well, boss's boss just received a package, and it contains marijuana." Well, I had enough deniability that while plenty of people suspected me, I got off. I learned something about my boss's boss that day. He didn't tell anyone upstream about it, and rumor has it that he took it home and smoked it. Edit, hostilities people. Look, had I shipped it to my home, the worst case scenario would have unacceptable consequences. Cops can intercept the package, obtain search warrant, find plenty of incriminating evidence in my home, I'm arrested, and lose my job. This is what we call an unacceptable risk. By sending it to the office, I had deniability. I increased the risk of losing $50 worth of weed, which is inconsequential. I also completely eliminated the risk of going to jail and losing my job. Even if the company made us all take a drug test, I can easily pass those. It's called risk mitigation. You identify potential risks and find the path that has the least potential consequences. As far as why weed online, all I could find in my area was Mexican brick swag. I went a nice dro. Professors and teachers of Reddit. What's the most pretentious thing you've heard a student say? Next year, you're still gonna be here BSing, and I'm gonna be making it big in the real world. He got held back. He is not in my class this year. I deserve an A for this course because I was a model student. I've heard some whoppers, but this one came from a student who completed, I think, 2 of the 5 required papers, and both were crap, missed half of the classes, was 15 plus minutes late every time he did show up, never participated in discussions, and didn't turn in a single homework assignment. To this day, the lack of self-awareness boggles my mind. Middle schooler said, "I'm only taking Spanish so I can tell my housekeeper what she needs to do." Oh God, it was me. I was the pretentious student. I was going into the 7th grade after transferring out of a private school to a local public school. I met with a couple of my upcoming teachers to take some placement tests since I had been taking a couple of, quote, advanced courses at my Catholic school. I say advanced because, as it turned out, the only real advancing I was doing was seeing how far I could shove my head up my butt. I basically preened the entire interview process whilst dropping some heavy-handed hints about being moved up to high school. I don't remember the specifics of what I said, or most likely I won't let myself, but I definitely implied that the tests were just a waste of time and it would be best to just enroll me in 9th grade. In my Catholic school, I had been in the highest level math course for the school. My public school entrance score put me in remedial pre-algebra. I cried. A lot. 4th grader. I don't need to do good in school. I can go to any college I want. My parents are rich. The thing is, he's not wrong, but can he stay there? Mommy and daddy can pay for your classes, but if you're not passing them, that's on you, bud. Do you know who my father is? His dad was the head of the school board. No craps were given that day. I've also had a kid say, "Didn't you wear that outfit last week?" This was at a very wealthy school. I was half expecting that first kid to start shouting, "Potter!" Post-grad students stayed after on day 1 to tell me, "Just so you know, I'm going to be very bored in your class. But it's not your fault. I just already know everything you're going to talk about." She completed the course with a D-, failed both of her other classes, lost her funding, and now works at Panda Express. From a 20-year-old undergrad, I'm going to be an accountant. I'll never need this database stuff. Well, to be fair, they probably won't. They'll learn all about the superior power of SQL databases and all they can do with them in the modern world. Then they'll join a practice and use the same Excel documents with archaic VB macros that have been used for decades because getting accountants to adopt new technologies is like flogging a dead horse. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's like a single computer running Excel somewhere in the world that if it were to crash, it would cause the entire world to just go into flames. Not from a student, but from the student's parent. He doesn't need to do the math, because he's a prophet. Prophets don't do math. Would you make Jesus do math? Jesus was a carpenter. He knew his math. My mom pays your salary, so give me an A. I'm a professor now, but I think my favorite comment came from a classmate of mine during my master's program. We were talking about some mass media theories, and the guy starts talking about framing. His contribution began with a long-winded explanation of the concept, and ended with him saying, "This is my idea, by the way. It's something I've been working on for the last couple of months." The list of citations on the Wikipedia page on framing is about 200 sources long, dating back to the mid-1950s. I'm a 4.0 on the dean's list, so academic misconduct won't be a problem for me. I'm going to be super wary of all this guy's papers. Like, sure, people cheat out of desperation, but desperation takes two forms: desperate to not fail and desperate to get the A and not the A-. As a high school English teacher, I was counseling a freshman student, about 14 years old, that she should probably do some of her coursework. After all, she wouldn't want to come to her senses as a junior or senior and realize that she was a year or two behind in credits and wouldn't be able to graduate. Her response? "Why should I listen to you? You make about as much as a garbage man." Lots of laughing, giving high fives to friends in class. Plenty of other students to focus on in class. I just moved on to help others in class. Tough to convince a 14-year-old to think ahead. Just checked her transcript. She's about a year and a half behind in credits. It's going to be very difficult for her to graduate this year. Side note, thank you to all the sanitation workers out there. Our comparative wages aren't really the point of this memory. Wow, it would take all of my self-control not to respond, "Yeah, and the trash they deal with doesn't talk back." Professor, I'm subscribed to Am I the Genius. Why didn't you give me an A? Oh, was it because I wasn't subscribed to Am I the Jerk linked in the description below? Thanks, Professor, in this weird analogy. I'll go do that. Not personally, but while I was student teaching in a wealthy area, another teacher told me he heard a student say that their parents got them a crappy car, but it was just until they totaled it. Then, after they destroyed it and learned their lesson, they get a Ferrari. I don't understand how this would teach them a lesson. Crash your car faster so you can get a new one and possibly be injured and or die in the process? Edit, probably an assassination plot. Notre Dame has required theology classes in first year of studies. My professor was a pretty laid-back guy, so one day, we're discussing the Tower of Babel. Humans all speak the same language and get tons of stuff done. They decide to build a tower to heaven. God doesn't like that, so he makes humans speak different languages so they can't communicate or build further. The professor asks why God would do something like that, and one student raised his hand and said, "Well, it's not for us to question God." The prof gave him a bemused look and replied, "Yes, it is. We're in a theology class." It was a fun class. I went on a date with a professor at Stanford who had a student raise their hand to ask if he was qualified to teach the course, most likely because he had a southern accent. I doubt they asked him that when he taught at Georgia Tech. I got a 77 for my final grade. Why didn't you bump me up to a B? This was after she didn't turn in the last 3 homeworks and had to have an extension on her final project because she didn't finish. My wife teaches a class where you literally have to show up and that's your grade. She understands athletics, family emergencies, etc. She had a student come in at the end of a semester and whine about the grade he got, a D, I think. The kicker? He flat out told her the reason he missed so much was because he was napping. He was lucky he got the grade he did. Clarification, the class in question is a performance class. You literally show up to practice for the performances and that's your grade. As a learning management system admin, I hear all kinds of crazy stuff during grade appeals. Last semester, a couple of kids on a sports team were cheating in a class. Each of the 5 would take turns taking the test first online and then in succession, so that while one may not get a great score, the rest usually did. So, the instructor asks how to resolve the issue. We make the 30-question test randomized from 100 question pools. Immediately following the next test, we have a meeting with the dean. Apparently, the students felt it was unfair. Nothing happened to us or them, but the fact that they actually filed a complaint because the test couldn't be cheated on amazed me. Edit, well, there went my inbox. So to answer some questions. Number 1. Blackboard is the #1 LMS provider in the world. Can it be terrible? Yes, if done wrong. Number 2. Random tests are not unfair if the questions are pulled from the information you are covering in class. Number 3. Yes, prevention of showing test results is an option, but does nothing if they are all in the same room just staring at the first student's computer and taking down the questions. This is why we randomized it. Number 4. There are lots of ways to tell if people are cheating. The easiest is how long it takes them to answer questions. Test start and end times also play a role. So in this case, one person would log in, take the test, and then show the results to the others. The rest would all log in at the same time and begin to answer a pretty difficult test very quickly. Number 5. They had no actual justification to complain, and they still filed a complaint. That's the nature of college. People complain about everything. If they can find a loophole, they will exploit it. Probably too late to the party, but I'm a high school art teacher. I was talking about art influences, and a kid said, "I'm not influenced by anyone. The only art I like is my own." Okay, kid. Oh man, I have a story about this. I was in the fine arts program at a state college. Had a classmate, Dawn. She was a quote, perpetual student, meaning she'd been in college for 10 plus years. She was over 30 in classes with 19-year-olds. We were in a figure drawing class together. Dawn was doing some god-awful rendition of the figure model, and the professor steps up and gives her some pointers. We were completing a specific assignment, not just doing whatever, but Dawn was drawing something way out of left field and unrelated to the figure study. Anyway, so the prof steps in and is talking to her very politely about how it's figure drawing time and not glitter glue stick time, and Dawn just looks at her and says, "But that's just not how I do my art." Professor was dumbfounded and I was cracking the heck up. Like, if you're not going to learn different art styles, why are you in an art class? Some context. It's a private Catholic school, but not the safest/best around. I was suggesting to a student to stop wearing their watch because it might be stolen. Quote, "But this is just my everyday Rolex." Student turned in his final paper, and instead of responding to one of the prompts, he wrote his paper on how much he hated the class and how terrible we were as teaching staff. I gave him a B because, while he didn't answer a prompt, he backed his claims up with evidence, which is well above average work compared to his classmates. All the same student. My dad said I don't have the personality to be a nurse. I need to be a doctor. I don't have time to join any student organizations. I'm married. I'm gonna make all A's this semester. Oh, that academic warning? I took care of that. She had a mediocre GPA, hadn't made good grades in science and math classes. Unless her dad built the medical school, she wasn't getting in. And that academic warning was totally legit. I spoke with her professor, and he laughed for quite a while when I told him that she said she would make an A. He said she might pass with a C- if she was lucky. The kicker? Her husband then called our office and threatened to get us all fired for daring to tell his precious wife something she didn't want to hear. Gave us a deadline to apologize to her before we called the president of the university to file his complaint about her behavior. Looked him up on Facebook. One of my teacher's assistants is an excellent Facebook stalker, and he works at a local bike shop. Not even a student at our university. We turned the voicemail over to campus police, and they had a chat with him. Update, May 2017. After 2 changes of major and 3 or 4 changes of pre-health designation, pre-med, pre-dent, pre-PA, whatever else, this student finally graduated. She is going to go to the local community college in the fall and start their respiratory therapy program. If she found her passion, then I'm happy for her. Yes, these are my favorite stories. I love the ones that have happy endings. I once overheard a student in the college-level science major-specific class that I teach say, I wonder if this teacher will be able to tell me something I don't already know. And apparently I did, because he failed the class with a 32%. Edit. Okay, wow, this blew up overnight, but 2 things. 1, I did not fail him or discriminate against him in any manner because of his arrogance. He just failed. 2, I have an 87% pass rate for my class. I teach a biology class that many only take if they want to major in biology or organic chemistry, so it isn't often that I get students passing through who are unmotivated or are bored by the material. I'm a good professor and certainly try my best to help my students succeed, but sometimes they either can't or won't. I don't really need to learn this kind of basic accounting. I'm definitely going to get a job at Goldman Sachs. To me, his TA. Spoiler, based on his grades, this kid was definitely not getting a job there. I don't deserve an F, you frickin' prick! I know, but it's as low as I can give you. Source, email between my dad and one of his more charming students. Edit, it is worth noting that I never knew who the student was, just that the exchange had taken place. As another commenter mentioned, it was the student who sent an email regarding his/her grade. In regard to the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, we're fine. We're the only students who have a chance of passing the AP exam, so you should just focus on us. She was referring to herself and 3 other classmates. She was also loud enough for the entire class to hear. Edit. For everyone asking if she was right, the class I taught had 20 kids. In my opinion, 16 of them had a shot at passing, but only 6 passed, including 3 from her group. One of the kids who wasn't in her group beat all their scores with a 5. So no, I don't think she was right. She also said at the end of the year, "You know, Mr. Chief Lazarus, it's gonna be your fault if I don't get into the college I wanted since you didn't give me an A." Unfortunately, this happens a lot in schools where standardized testing is tied to big funding increases. So-called high kids and bubble kids receive all the attention, ensuring they will pass, and teachers' efforts aren't wasted on other students. Maybe this kid was a jerk, or maybe they've been isolated and focused on during their whole academic career, and they thought that this was just how the system worked. Edit, for people telling me I'm wrong, my source is my experience as a high school teacher. Our testing facilitator sat me down and told me which kids to work with during testing seasons. It was basically the top 30 to 50% of any given class. Everyone else was ignored because she assumed they wouldn't score high enough to help us hit our numbers. Your school or district may be different. This was mine. When I used to teach 1st grade, we had our school-wide open house in the 2nd week of school, so we're maybe 7 or 8 days into the year. I had a parent come up to me and ask, "So, how is my daughter doing academically compared to everyone else in here? She'll be going to an Ivy League school, so she needs to be the best student in your class." I told her that we were less than 2 weeks in and that I don't, quote, rank students for 1st grade. The mom was a thorn in my side for the rest of the year. I'm a student, but our teacher once gave us the whole, if you're not going to be respectful, if you think you already know the material, then just leave. A kid stands up, walks over to the door, realizes that everybody is staring at him, thinks about going to sit back down, but decides on just leaving. The teacher actually let him leave for like 15 minutes before going to get him. This was middle school, so he couldn't leave campus. My first year teaching, I subbed in a grade 10 English class. It was September, and one of the girls in the class was heavily pregnant, so would have gotten pregnant in grade 9. All they had to do in this period was write 1 page about themselves. Easy sub lesson. So I'm walking around checking work, and this girl and her group have done crap all. So I pop over to them and remind them they only have 20 minutes left and need to get something written on their page. Without a pause, the girl looks up at me and says, "Miss, Jesus didn't write his own Bible now, did he?" I just walked away. And Mary didn't screw anyone to get pregnant. Finish your essay. This one's sad, but a high school kid showed me his Patek Philippe watch, told everyone it's $18,000 and worth more than his teacher. His dad gave it to him. Dad, or mom, never came to PTA. Didn't answer calls or respond to his grades or notes home. He stayed with a different family. His parents vacationed without him. Just give me the exam. I already know all you tell me. I've been doing this for 4 years back home. I mean, wood framing and concrete. My trade I teach is steel stud framing, drywall, taping, etc. No concrete or wood framing. Never mind the fact that the apprenticeship itself is 4 years. From a senior who can barely read or write after I told him he needed to check his essay for spelling/grammar errors. Whatever, man. I'm gonna come back here in 5 years and make way more than you. I said, considering that I'm a public school teacher, I certainly hope that he will make more than me. This is from a 16-year-old student arguing about the grade she earned on a research paper. My essay doesn't need any citations because my opinions are fact. I have never in my life been consumed with the urge to backhand a child more than this one right here. I gave a student a C on a philosophy paper, and she says to me, "Do you know who my father is?" To this day, I have no idea, but the grade didn't change. We're going to end this with a wild one. I have a student that refuses to do anything the way other students do it. He's never been able to make a single, regularly scheduled workshop or presentation 3 years now. Oh, medical school prerequisites? They don't apply to him. He once requested that I come in on a Saturday to meet with him because my regular office hours, quote, didn't work for him. He was my student for 2 years, but now that he's an upperclassman, he is handled by one of my colleagues. I warned her. She didn't believe me. Until he walked into her office this morning to tell her he can't make any of the required workshops he needs to attend, but since he already filled out the paperwork, that's cool, right? He would also like us to find a way for him to graduate early because he just got engaged and wants to use his tuition money for the wedding or something. I don't know. I don't really listen to him anymore. Edit. My throwaway account now has more karma than my real account. I have to get some sleep now so I can go back to the university bright and early to mold young minds or something. I will try to remember this account and update with news of this pretentious jerkwad. But for now, the sweet, sweet release of sleep awaits. Edit 2. He just came in the office wearing skinny jeans and a fedora! Edit 3. It's been 2 months and no one will see this, but this jerkwad sent me an email the other day and spelled my name wrong. Don't send me an email asking for a favor, then spell my freaking name wrong. Spell other crap wrong, but check that you spelled the name of the person you are emailing correctly. Edit 4. 5 months since the original post. He had his committee interview. I spoke to the prof who conducted it, and she said he started off really well, but then the mask slipped and it became very obvious that he's a huge jerk. He thinks very highly of himself, even though he isn't really very accomplished. By pre-med standards, he's pretty average. He brags about things he's done like he's the only person that has ever done them. He's still trying to graduate early so he can hurry up and get married, but med schools aren't going to be impressed by that. I'm still trying to get on his subcommittee panel since I didn't interview him. Not to tank it, since I will be one of 20 people, but to see what everyone else thinks. We have far more impressive students who have accomplished a lot more, and I'm really backing their applications. And, since I had the flu, I'm headed back to bed. Edit 5, May 2017. I finally logged back into this account and had a bunch of messages asking for an update. I read the student's committee letter a few weeks ago, and it was nicer than the one I would have written. From what I heard, the subcommittee lowered the author's scores a bit since they thought she was too kind to him. They've all dealt with him at some point and find him very pretentious. It's going to be a few months before I find out his fate, but I think he graduated, I haven't checked, and is probably planning his super pretentious hipster wedding. My colleague next door now refers to him as, quote, my favorite student whenever she hears from him. In a sarcastic way. Therapists of Reddit. What was your "you must be kidding me" moment? Some of these are gross. Doctor I used to work with told me about a woman who tried to kill herself, so they put her in a safe room. She then proceeded to try an overdose on water, which he told me is possible, but really hard to do. A client was going to probate court and thought he'd dress up by putting a non-slip sock on his collar as a tie. Trying to be supportive, I told him, "Nice tie," to which he replied, "It's not a tie, it's a sock, stupid." One client of mine bites and eats his fingernails. Gross, but not unheard of. Then I learned he stores his fingernails in a box in his room to save them for a snack later. A little grosser, but he's about 9, so I'm hoping he will grow out of it. What finally made me want to vomit was learning that when anyone in his family clips their nails, fingers or toes, they give him the clippings to add to his box. So when he's eating nails from the box, they could belong to his mother, father, or siblings. Yes, I've addressed the parents about enabling this behavior, but it is still happening. Edit. Thank you for all your concerns for my client. I'm aware that it seems like pica or some sort of nutrition deficiency, and for all I know, it could be. I'm a behavioral therapist and not qualified to professionally recommend medical treatments to the family. I do know his parents have taken him to several doctors for multiple different tests for disorders, so this could have been addressed and they just chose not to disclose the information to me. I used to work with children that have autism and Down syndrome, which means a lot of play therapy. I had my moment when one of my clients wanted to sit on my lap while we practiced reciting animal cards, followed with their corresponding noise. Forgot what animal noise I made that made him laugh so much that he ended up peeing on me from the laughter. That night was also date night. Intake clinician here. What brings you in today? I'm here for adult image addiction. At this point, not the weirdest thing I've heard. Let's go with that. Okay, tell me about it. I watch it 3 times a week, for 15 minutes or so at a time. My girlfriend said I'm an addict and forced me to come in. I see lots of very extreme cases, but this was so minor that it made me stop for a moment. I sent them to couples counseling. Just today, I conducted a threat assessment on the first grader who told his teacher he wanted to stab himself with a knife and die. Upon further questioning, he revealed that he and Dad watched The Walking Dead together, and last time on the show, he saw 2 people stab themselves to death because, quote, they didn't want to get eaten by the zombies. Why are you even watching that show with a 6-year-old? Had a client who he found out was storing his own poop under his bed. He would then eat his poop for a snack. Edit. So I guess I should have added why he did this. First issue, he thought he was an alien, so eating his poop had a few benefits in his mind. First benefit, we could not study his poop. Second benefit, he felt that alien poop had nutrients he could not get from our food. He would eat normal food, but we found out he felt Earth food was poison and alien poop fixed that. Third benefit, alien poop is worth a lot of money, so he did not want us to steal it. When we found out what he was doing, I got to inform him that we were taking away his poop. He kicked me. Obligatory, not a therapist, but my hyperconservative parents sent me to an addiction therapist because they found out I smoked pot occasionally in high school. The therapist they chose was a former White House drug czar, a renowned authority on cocaine addiction and hard drug abuse, and an expert on rehabilitating extreme problem cases. My parents must have spent a fortune and pulled strings to get me an appointment. The first session, he asked me what drugs I use. I told him I smoke pot like once a week, and that was it. After a few rounds of, come on, you can trust me, and we can't begin treatment until you admit your problem, he realizes that I really do only smoke pot once in a while, and literally says, you've got to be kidding me. Tell your parents you're a normal teenager and you don't need to come back. One that sticks out in my mind was a mother that brought in her 5-year-old for therapy because she was into Disney princesses, which are clearly sexual, and since a 5-year-old is non-sexual, this must clearly mean she's being inappropriately abused by a close family member. I've also worked with countless couples who have come to counseling for adultery, wherein adultery equals adult images. One client even became suicidal because she caught her husband pleasuring himself after not screwing him for months. I know everyone has different values, but come on, y'all. Friendly reminder that if you enjoyed this content, hit subscribe and like the video. It really does help. And also, subscribe to Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Thanks for watching, and remember to drink some water too. I was working surveillance one night at a psych ward, keeping a close watch on a mentally ill patient. Right before my shift started, I was briefed that the patient had started eating one of the light bulbs and attacked a nurse. At around 5 a.m., he woke up and saw me sitting there at the end of his bed. I said good morning, and he didn't reply. About 15 minutes of silence went by before he stood up, stared out the window, and said, "A person is most vulnerable when taking a crap." I didn't sit back down for the rest of my shift. Social work. Not therapy, but close enough. Me. We need to think of some new ways for you to discipline your daughters other than spanking. Client. But my parents did it to me, and I turned out okay. Me. Stares at this high school dropout drug addict who has spent his entire adult life in and out of jail/halfway houses, can't get a job, and has had his 3 kids removed for abuse and neglect. Okay. I actually did successfully turn this around in a gentle way and make him realize he hadn't actually, quote, turned out okay. I had a client, an older female refugee that I worked with for several months before she told me that she had court the next week and was worried because she could be deported if found guilty. She didn't tell me earlier because she was ashamed and suffered in silence. She was living with extended family, and the family got busted for smuggling and selling khat, a stimulant narcotic. The family determined that she would take the fall for her husband and sons who were behind the operation. At the arrest, the police brought an interpreter for a different language from a different ethnic group in a different country than the client was from. On top of that, she said the police didn't have an interpreter present during the questioning at the station, and she waited there for almost 2 days until they found an interpreter for her language. I asked her if she understood what was happening, and she said her lawyer, public defendant she met once, told her she would be deported. Beyond that, she had no understanding of the situation, process, etc. I had seen her psych evaluation stating that she had the cognitive equivalent of a 7-year-old. So I told her that we have information that could help her case and that her lawyer should see it as soon as possible. This was on a Friday, court was on Wednesday, and the client didn't know the name or any information about her public defender. We got a friend to help her collect the information. The client brought it to me on Monday, signed the ORI. Lawyer called me back that afternoon saying they've got nothing to help this poor woman even though the case seems appropriately set up. I told the lawyer that we've got a whole bunch of insight and data and records that will get the charges dropped. I didn't work Tuesdays and was going nuts worrying and hoping everything would get to where it needs to and in the hands of the people who need to see it. On Wednesday, news from court comes that all charges were dropped. I used to get all kinds of things sprung on me at the last minute, then have to perform all kinds of bureaucratic trapeze maneuvers to alter the outcome of high-stakes situations. I wrote so many letters. I was hired to be a mental health provider, but I ended up doing tons of case management because nobody else wanted to. Have a master's in clinical psychology and currently working towards my doctorate. I laughed reading this question because I feel like I have at least one of those moments per day at my clinic rotations, regardless of type of setting. One that stood out the most was when I was working a camp for children with various psychological disorders, most with some sort of behavioral concerns. The girl I was paired with had a history of aggressive and violent tendencies. We went the whole day without any problems. That was, until we were doing some group physical activity to wind down and focus before leaving for the day. She didn't like that this meant no longer playing with a certain toy, so she took off her shoe and threw it at the little boy in front of her. He had autism and immediately started crying and screaming. While someone helped him, I turned to the girl to explain to her what she did was wrong. As I turned towards her, she punched me square in the face, then grabbed a hold of my hair. Managed to pull out a good chunk. I'm about 5'1", and this girl was maybe 1 or 2 inches shorter than me and had about 20 pounds on me, despite being 9 years old. Trying to get a safe physical restraint was difficult and comical to say the least. Finally got some help from other staff, and we were able to calm her down after about 15 minutes. The kicker was, when we told her mom what happened, she basically dismissed the entire thing and laughed about it. So frustrating, because you know this kind of thing is reinforced at home as there is no punishment. The girl then starts hitting her mom, who grabs and holds down her arms. The little girl laughs, looks at me, and the other staff member, and says, "Ugh, a little help over here? Are you going to let her do this to me? She's hurting my arm." I went home and did this weird laugh/cry for a few hours. Luckily, you learn pretty quickly not to take things personally and move on, so things were back to normal the next day. I do occasionally look back at that day just baffled at how quickly that whole situation escalated. Most of the other moments that come to mind involve poop in some capacity. I work in a community residence for adults with mental illness. Most of them are very capable and independent. One girl, 27 years old, constantly acts really dumb for sympathy and will do dumb things because she can, I guess. First week she was admitted, she tripped on something getting out of bed. She's 5'1" and like 200 pounds, and she fell on her foot and broke some of the small bones in the foot. I take her to get her cast, and she gets the usual don't get the cast wet, use your crutches, elevate, blah blah blah. Since her bedroom was on the 2nd floor, we had to send her back to her mother's house for a few weeks since she would not be able to exit the building in time in case of emergency. Well, 5 days later, the shoe/boot thingy to put over your cast comes in, and we call her up saying we'll bring it over. Her response? "Well, I don't think it'll fit." "Why not?" we ask. "Because I cut my cast off. I got it wet, and it was too tight." They didn't give her a second cast and she never used her crutches, claiming they were unstable and she would fall and get hurt if she used them. Her foot never healed properly, and 2 months later, she fell and broke it again. Edit, since you all have questions. She didn't get a second cast because A, she would have to pay for it herself and she didn't have the money, and B, doctors did not want to give her another plaster cast, fearing she would just cut that off too. Other options for a cast insurance wouldn't cover. Number 2. Yes, being 5'1" and 200 pounds is severely overweight. Many times, people with mental health issues come from low-income backgrounds. Often, people with mental illness are overweight due to lack of good health care and know-how to lose weight themselves. Number 3. I can tell she acts stupid on purpose for several reasons. Mostly that when she thinks we're not watching, she slips up and behaves normally and makes actual intelligent decisions. Also, she's told us she thinks guys like her more if she's stupid, and she gets lots of sympathy from people for how stupid she is. Number 4. To the person who said she might likely lose the foot, she's told us she wants her foot amputated because then it wouldn't hurt so much. Logic. My client told me his family didn't appreciate his interest in guns, to which he proceeded to tell me he is always carrying. He then places his gun on the table in front of me and asked if it made me nervous. It did, but we focused more about why he wanted to know if I was nervous, and I brought it back around to his family. From then on, I made sure to always have access to a door and never put the client between the door and myself again, just to be safe. This recently happened to me. I have a client who is a daily methadone doser. During our last session, he complained of sleep issues. Delving into this new issue, he described his solution to me. He saves his spit in a jar to drink at night when he is unable to sleep. Saves his spit in a jar to drink later. I'm a therapist and have a few of these stories, but this story was actually told to me by a therapist friend of mine. He said that he was working in a mental hospital a few years ago, and he and other staff had heard a loud scream from down the hall. They ran to go check it out and got to a patient's room to see blood all over his face and hand, and realized he had torn his own eyeball out. They tried to defuse the situation and start looking around for the eyeball. They couldn't find it. He had eaten his own eyeball. Edit. I don't know the reason the patient gave for eating and or removing his eye, but I will say it takes a pretty severe level of psychosis for a person to be able to do this. Honestly, he was probably more concerned about the quote reason he needed to take his eye out than he was with the pain of it. I can't imagine the emotional pain he must have been going through to be able to get to this point. Worked one summer at a summer school for special needs children about 2 years ago when I was 14. I was just a teacher's aide, so most of what I was doing was playing with the lower maintenance children and just running errands for the teachers. One morning, I was helping the kids put their stuff into their cubbies, and one of the kids was just standing in front of his, staring at me with his lunch bag in his hands. This was one of the more violent kids who would act up at the slightest of breezes. He was about 11 or 12 and had severe autism. I asked him if he needed help putting his stuff away, and he replied with only some mumbling. I asked him to speak clearly, and he said, "I'm going to hurt you." I was really confused and asked him to repeat what he said. He then screamed at the top of his lungs, "I'm going to hurt you!" and swung his lunchbox straight for my head. Luckily, I kinda expected this thing to happen, so I was ready to duck, and he missed. I was not allowed to even touch any of the students because I was not trained to restrain them, so until the teachers got him under control, all I could do was run around the classroom as he chased me. Once the teachers restrained him, he was under control within about 10 or 15 minutes. When the teacher asked him why he did what he did, he said that he was angry because his dad didn't bring him to Denny's that morning. I was assaulted because a kid didn't get to go to Denny's. Quite common, actually. Anything outside the normal routine, and they have a meltdown. My son is autistic, and when he was younger, he'd have an absolute meltdown when the seasons changed. For the winter months, he'd obviously put on his winter jacket, hat, and gloves. Once spring came, I gave him a light coat one morning, and he fell to the ground crying and screaming because he thought he wasn't going to school. Tough days, let me tell you. Thankfully, he has amazing teachers and support, and my biggest problem now is he takes his socks off at night and throws them on the side of his huge bunk bed that I can't move. So, typical annoying kid stuff now. Forensic therapist here. I work with paroled sex offenders. One time, a guy I worked with urinated on my coworker's car in broad daylight. She was in the car. He made eye contact with her while he was doing it. His PO picked him up from group 20 minutes later. He's currently having a little vacation at a state facility. When I worked in bereavement, a client of mine used the term, quote, skid marks when discussing the accident. For some reason, there and then, the expression just caught me off guard. I joined the dots, and the corners of my mouth started to rise. In actuality, this may have only lasted a moment, but it felt like minutes. All the while I was drawing blood as I chewed down on the insides of my cheeks. I felt like the worst human being alive. Was running an addiction treatment group. Some of the participants were referred by the court, usually for a DUI. The referral conditions were simple. If they finished treatment, they would not serve time in jail for the DUI. One of these court-referred DUI participants ran a limo service and showed up to group with a tablet and cell phone. He spread things out and proceeded to treat the space as his personal office. I intervened, explaining he would not be able to conduct business while participating in the group. He gave me a look that would have killed an ordinary person, said it was a busy time of year and he really needed to stay in touch with his drivers. I told him I understood, but he still needed to put the stuff away and pay attention. Lots of eye rolling, I can't believe this lady, and he still kept checking his phone and getting up to go outside and take calls. During the break, I told him his behavior was disruptive and he would have to leave. This seemed to make him happy, until I added I will be telling the judge he did not complete treatment. For the first time, he seemed to slowly realize he was there for a reason and might actually end up in jail because of his behavior. He apologized and asked to stay, and he settled down after that. Had a patient who swallowed things as a self-injuring behavior. This individual would swallow anything metal and pointy, usually as a way of getting into the hospital or to stay in the hospital. At one point, they wanted to get surgeries or procedures to have the objects removed, but they didn't actually want to die. One instance where they almost died after ingesting a series of closed safety pins that ended up opening inside their stomach stopped them from eating things that wouldn't pass. Anyway, so this person was upset that they were getting discharged as they wanted to stay until the beginning of the month. Hate to say it, but it's not uncommon to see people come in because they are out of benefits for the month. The usual complaints of wanting to die weren't working because we know this person doesn't actually want to die. So they went and swallowed the iron from the Monopoly game. It didn't work, we still discharged them, but ever since then, we haven't been allowed to have board games on the unit without staff supervision. Had a client who was told he absolutely had to start losing weight else he would become troublingly diabetic and begin losing appendages. He didn't put much effort in, eventually having his foot amputated. Time after time I saw him, I had to explain that having a foot amputated did not count as half a stone towards his weight loss targets. He was genuinely mortified. Had a patient once with auditory hallucinations. They suddenly decided I was, quote, the voice, and they had to do whatever I said. So, I encouraged them to do positive things for others, and always be nice to their mother. You know, now I actually am curious. If there's anybody listening to these videos out there with schizophrenia, how does that affect you? Did the voices affect you in a positive way? Do they tell you to do positive things? Or are these hallucinations always negative? Let me know in the comments. I was working with a woman who had struggled with alcohol throughout her life and during her pregnancies. She denied drinking while pregnant, but 2 of her children were born with fetal alcohol syndrome. She was seeing me in session to process her reaction to receiving letters from her children that basically called her out for being a bad mom and saddling them with the disease because she drank. She was really defensive and said, I don't know why they're mad at me, because everyone knows you get fetal alcohol syndrome from the dad. Not sure if deflecting or just that uninformed. It was pretty memorable when a histrionic patient leapt onto my desk so I could better appreciate her new sneakers.
Parents who dislike, hate, or resent your children. What happened? My son told his friends that I was abusing and bad-touching him because he wanted the attention. We were very close. Child services were called and then the police. He stuck to his story. I don't hate him. I never could. Sometimes I'm very angry, but mostly the betrayal gets me. I would never have believed he would do that. After several awful months, I think it's going to be all right legally, but the legal fees and stress has been overwhelming. Things will never be the same between us. He is a teenager, by the way. I remarried a wonderful man, my soulmate, about 2 years ago. I have 2 kids of my own, 1 son and 1 daughter. One is 14 and the other is 21. He has a daughter. She is almost 8. We met when his daughter was about 3.5. It's bad to say, but personality-wise, she hasn't changed very much for the last 4 years or so. I don't necessarily dislike my stepdaughter all the time. I have just had to distance myself a bit. She has no manners, no respect, she's spoiled and will whine until she gets her way. For example, I overheard her tell her great-grandmother to shut up. I also heard her tell her mom, "You are the most disgusting person I've ever met." When they scold her, she always tries to say she was just joking, and then she will start to cry and saying nobody wants me around and stuff like that. I know this is turning into a long post and I apologize. It just has been building up so long. I try my best with her and I had such high hopes for a close relationship with my stepdaughter, but I have found that our personalities clash, and I am used to having respectful kids. My husband tries his best to make her act right, but every time she goes back to her mom's or her grandparents, it gets worse. They give her everything she wants, no matter what, and they allow her to talk to them anyway because she's still little and they may not have any more kids and grandkids. So I don't blame my husband. I feel bad for him because he's tired of having to be the bad guy all the time. Oh, and she likes to torment my cats. I tell her all the time to be nice to them, pet them gently, or better yet, leave them alone. But she likes to chase them, pour water on them, throw dirt at them, etc. She has plenty of toys in her room and also electronics and games, but she will cry and whine until my husband lets her use his laptop. She likes to watch toy commercials on YouTube and tell us what she wants for Christmas or her birthday. She makes these 5-page long lists of what she wants all the time. And then, if she doesn't get it, she whines that she never gets anything she wants. Her mother told us she picked out a $50 Halloween costume last week. She said that she told her that was way too expensive to pay when she is only going to wear it a few hours. Well, stepdaughter proceeds to cry and say she doesn't have anything and never gets anything and she needs new parents. One more thing that makes me mad. If adults are in the room trying to have a conversation, she will interrupt repeatedly until they stop talking and listen to her or watch her do some little something that could have waited. This child gets more attention than any of the other children, so I know it's not lack of attention that causes it. One more thing I thought of. About a year ago, I had my little granddaughter over at our house. She was about 9 months old at the time. Stepdaughter got caught trying to give the baby rocks. Well, we all got on her and tell her how dangerous it is to give the baby rocks. Babies can choke and get injured or even die. All that. Well, a few minutes later, I catch her putting the rocks in my grandbaby's pocket and I go mental. After telling her she could choke and die if she gets hold of a rock, she is putting them in the baby's pocket. Just one more example that there is something not right with this girl. When my wife was pregnant with our first and only child, we knew before birth that she was at high risk of Down syndrome because the gene was quite prevalent in both of our family histories. We both got tested and the doctor told us that our daughter had over 80% chance that she will be born with Down syndrome. Our marriage up to this point was happy and wonderful. We dated for 9 months before getting married and were more of partners than a couple. Everything we did, we decided together. We bought our own business, which didn't cause any fights, but rather we thrived because she was good at what I wasn't and vice versa. I was a messy kid before I met her and she helped me change my ways. She lacked hobbies before I met her and I helped her finding things she truly loved doing. We were happy. Very, very happy. The doctor told us that abortion was a viable option, but we needed to decide within a week or it would be too late. I knew right away that I was for the abortion, but didn't know how to bring it up. When we finally did sit down and talk, I brought all sorts of articles and books on kids with Down syndrome. I tried to show her rather than convince her of how hard our life would be if our child actually did have it. It was going to be hard for both of us to have a healthy child, let alone one that needed far more care. We were both busy and happy. She didn't want to take that option, and there was nothing I could really do to change her mind without really making her mad and ruining our relationship. So reluctantly, I went with it. As luck would have it, our daughter was born with translocation Down syndrome. Only 1% of all cases of Down syndrome are that, and it has a lot to do with hereditary conditions. I don't want to go into how bad our life became. I really can't even handle typing it out. My wife had to quit her job, which she adored. We had to move to a smaller house after a year and a half because of the medical bills. When I came home from work, she was too tired to talk or even see me and went to bed, and my entire our 5 hours of free time every single day we spent caring for our daughter in some form or another. I didn't see my friends for 9 months, missed my cousin's wedding because we couldn't even think about traveling. Everything changed, and everything changed for the worst. My wife and I only talked when we fought. Either she was too tired and that caused her anger, or I worked too much and didn't help her enough. To tell you my life went to absolute crap is an understatement, because I can't even imagine how much extra stress my wife must have endured in those first couple of years. I don't hate my daughter, but I do resent the fact that we had her, even though I knew our life would be this way. I go to the park sometimes and sit and watch all the happy fathers play with their kids, watch them throw balls around or just run around the jungle gym. That's the life I wanted, that I dreamed of, but I will never have. My wife and I are still together because neither wants to burden the other by leaving. I ain't even going to take a side on this one. I think if you're going to have a child, you need to have absolute open honesty about your feelings of what's going to happen and all that stuff, but I'm not really going to touch this one too much. Not my child, but my husband's youngest son from his first marriage. I don't hate him. I care very much for him, but he is impossible to like. He's 12 and completely incapable of entertaining himself in any way. If he isn't pacified with television or some other electronic device, he's wandering the house being as loud and obnoxious as possible because bad attention is still attention. If you give him attention or try to find an activity to do together, he'll simply try to use that as a bargaining chip to get something else he wants later. He will do anything to play video games, and if you allow it, he will play all day without getting dressed or eating. He will also pretend to be sick to stay at home from school to play video games. He has a time limit but will lie and sneak to try and play longer. Taking away these things does no good. He'll continue to be an obnoxious, annoying little poo until he can play again. Sometimes I let him play so he will stop bothering everyone in the house. He's a chronic bedwetter, so he frequently smells like urine. He's got issues with pooing his pants sometimes too, and swears that he has no idea when or how it happens. He's been to numerous doctors and counselors who tell us to give him fiber. He's been instructed to change out the dirty clothes and put them in the wash, but he won't admit to it. Instead, he soils his pants. He'll often hide them somewhere until his disgusting cache is discovered and he gets in trouble. His punishment is usually a video game ban, but his behavior never changes. I love my husband more than anything, and his other kids and my kids are no issue at all, just the okay youngest. I feel like a monster. Oh yeah, some kids just do not have any mind for cleanliness or anything. God, hiding your soiled underwear and stuff like that in a cache, that sounds just ugh. This may be my deepest, darkest secret ever, and even now it almost brings me to tears to type this. One of my children with mental illnesses has been self-deletion adjacent and has survived numerous attempts. There have been times where I have had to sit in a chair in her room and watch her all night while she sleeps. Everything is locked up in our house. I keep cleaning supplies in my desk at work and bring them home only to clean and then take them back. Everything is a battle with her. It's embarrassing all the time we have an ambulance or cops come over. There is so much more that goes on. Anyway, I can remember one really, really awful period in our lives about a year ago where I honestly felt like she had not survived her attempt and that life for me and her siblings would be easier. There are a lot of days where I feel like I resent her inside. I just tell myself and try and remember that she is still the sweet girl I remember from her being a kid. What I resent is the person she is on meds and the depressed, self-harming person she is when not on meds. I don't dislike or hate my son, but I damn sure have some resentments every now and then. I have a 5-year-old with extreme behavioral and anger issues. They stem from a large dose of steroids required for a long period of time for a previous medical issue. I am not in the dark about these issues. I have a psychiatrist and counselor that we pay for him. However, no one is willing to do anything because he is 5. No diagnosis, barely medication. I have had to inpatient hospitalize my 5-year-old son twice. I have another child younger than him that was born around the same time that all of this started happening, and I just watched the difference between the two. I sometimes wish I had switched and had her first because the only reason I was trying again was so I could have a girl. I watch happy, functional families, and it makes me angry because we have been burdened by this. We can't travel, we can't go to parks or things of that nature because he targets other children, and I don't want to be that butthole mom on the the playground that just lets my son beat the crap out of other kids. CPS is now involved for the 4th time in 2 years because at school he cracked a kid across the head with a rock because the school refuses to give him an IEP because he is so young. My husband and I have tried every parenting book, behavioral therapy method, strategy, etc. Nothing seems to work. Some days I just turn my phone on silent because I know it's going to be the school calling me saying he won't sit still in class and keeps running out of the classroom acting like a butt. But I have asked them repeatedly for an IEP and they refuse. Don't get me wrong, I love my son more than life itself, but it frickin' kills me to watch him have to live like this. He is so angry all the time and sometimes I have to hold him in a full Nelson on the floor crying so that he won't hurt himself or anyone else. I wish other parents knew what this torture was like, the constant self-doubt and wondering where we went wrong. It is slowly killing my marriage and I honestly wouldn't blame my husband if he did leave. In fact, I'd probably send our daughter with him just to make sure she was safe. So yes, I completely understand where some of these other parents in this thread are, and I don't judge anyone anymore when they say their kids have pushed them to the edge. I've been there and back so many times, I have the route memorized. Maybe it's hypocritical of me, but I've got ADHD, a thing that a lot of people for a long time and probably still think, oh, it's just a way to handwave bad behavior and all that. But something that I think is genuinely just an excuse to handwave bad behavior is ODD, which is oppositional defiance disorder. I think that is a absolute crock. I made an account just for this question. I beyond resent my son. He's 7. He lies all the time. He never listens and does harmful things to others. His father took off before he was born. The states say they can't find him without an SSI or address for me to receive support. I've been living off the state for over 6 years. I work and go to uni full time. Every day is an argument and fight with this child. There are no fun times. There are no happy moments. He makes me miserable. All I want to do is graduate with my bachelor's in engineering. Every morning he makes me late for class because he refuses to listen to a single word. I've tried all the ways of disciplining or rewarding to get him on track. He's in special education for speech and math support. The doctor diagnosed him with ADHD last month. We are working through getting the right dose. But for now, he made me miss my calculus class again because he refused to get out of bed this morning. I don't think I love him anymore. I feel like he's sabotaging my life and chances of getting out of the welfare system. I'm miserable with him in my life. I'm not a parent, but I have had my oldest niece, 4, almost 5 years old, basically 24/7, barring the few times every month or so that her mum will take her home for a 12-hour period. Since she was a year and a half old, at this point I am the only stable parental figure she has ever really known. I do not hate or dislike her per se, but I do resent her. I resent all the attention she requires. She wants eyes focused on her all the time, and when she feels like she's not getting enough attention, she becomes a holy terror. I know part of her attention seeking is because her parents, who live right next door, pay little to no attention to her. I know a lot of her behavior stems from them basically ignoring her. She's very, very loud and likes to make nonsense animal noises all the time. She loves pretending to be a dinosaur. She loves singing. She loves running and playing just like any other 4-year-old, but she does not get the concept of quiet time or indoor voices. I suffer from migraines, and I have explained to her every time I have one that I need her to play quietly until my emergency medication starts working. So I tell her to sit quietly and watch a movie or draw for an hour or so. And as soon as I lay down, she's in my face, almost yelling for me to play with her or watch her do something, etc. She's also a bit of a brat too. When she doesn't get her way with something, she immediately runs to my grandmother, who gives her whatever she wants. Toys, sweets, whatever. When she does get in trouble, be it for screaming non-stop or destroying something, this happens at least 4 times a day, if not more, or being mean to or playing too rough with cats and dogs. Timeouts, spanking, sitting down, talking, explaining, rewards, none of it works. Any attention, good or bad, she wants it. When I tell her not to do something, the minute I'm out of sight, she's doing it. When I tell her not to pull on the dog's tail, she just pulls harder. When I tell her that she cannot smack the cat for not wanting to be pet or held by her, she chases the cat and corners him and then hits him when he scratches her. It doesn't help that I am literally the only one in the house that will stand up to my grandmother and put my foot down about her being disciplined. I am the only one that takes none of this little girl's bullcrap. Everyone else lets her get away with everything. Beyond all this, and as guilty as this makes me feel, I also resent her because during my last miscarriage I still had to take care of her. I resent her mother for this too, but I resent her because it does not matter to her that even though she was told I was sick, or even when she was sat down and someone explained what was happening, she still wanted me to play with her and would not leave me alone for longer than 20 minutes. I resent her because for months after my miscarriage she would still ask me when the baby would be here, and since it is now shortly after she was told the baby wouldn't be here, she is asking again. I understand that she's just a little kid, but it still hurts, and I feel guilty for that too. I resent her because even though I have no children of my own, I now have to live my life as if I do, which means now that I am working out of the house on third shift, I have to sacrifice my sleep in order to care for her. Because her mother won't, I resent her much more lately because every time I try to discipline her or work with her, she's taken to screaming in my face, "You're not my mummy, I don't have to listen to you." She needs therapy for her anger, for her attention seeking, for the neglect from her parents. She just does not know how to cope, and I don't know how to help her. Don't get me wrong, I resent her mother much, much more than I do my niece. In fact, I would go as far as to say that I hate her mother for all of this, for screwing up her child, for ignoring her, for expecting me to care for her kid, while imposing rules for how she wants her child raised, and tells her that she doesn't have to listen to me. I hate her mother with every fiber of my being. Every time I have to comfort her when she's crying for her mom because she misses her. I love my niece though. I love spending time with her and taking her to the park and making meals together and doing art with her. I love taking her to the museums and carnivals and movies. I love finding things to do with her that will teach her something or discover something new. I love that every day I find out something new about her as a person, and I love that we are so close. As much as I resent her for demanding my attention above everyone else's in the house, I mean, I live in a 3-bedroom house that 9 people reside in. There are plenty of people to play with. When I had my last miscarriage, I am also grateful for it. It would have been so easy to allow myself to wallow in the depression I fell into when it happened, but her excessive need for my attention made it to where I couldn't. All I could do was throw myself into taking care of her. My niece is intelligent and beautiful. She is strong and creative, and so very opinionated. I know that someday, if she gets some therapy, she will do great things. You know, I'm a strong believer in nuanced opinion, but some of these people writing about these kids just sound frickin' bipolar. Oh, I hate them. Oh, I resent them. Oh, but I love them and they're beautiful and they have such a great soul. I get it. You can easily fall into disliking children very easily, you know. I get it. Parenting is the hardest thing, quite honestly. It's a huge frickin' sacrifice, whether they are disabled, some of the other stories that we've heard, or like this, where it's just an attention-seeking kid. But my God, I just wish they wouldn't start with as much as they hate them at the start, and then it's oh, but it's all good, they're great and everything. I just don't believe it at that point. I love my children to death, and I would never go back if I could, but I absolutely feel it is normal to have a moment here or there where you're not too thrilled to be a parent. It completely changes everything about your life, even when your children are average, let alone have disabilities that make things more difficult. My children have no behavior problems, no problems at school, no health problems, nothing like that. But it's still difficult. I still have moments where I am resentful, not necessarily of them, but of the loss of what my life used to be. It would be nice to not be a parent every once in a while, and I don't mean send them to grandma's for the day, because even when they are gone, you still have that responsibility. This might be one of the absolute best answers here, but it's also extremely vague. I'll admit, for everything I just said previously, I do appreciate all of the, honesty that people kind of have with it. I live and breathe sports and activity. His mother was a personal trainer and I was a gym rat. Our first date was on a climbing wall. We got married in a canoe. We took trips all around the world. We lived life like a travel brochure. Our son was born with cerebral palsy and AMC, which basically means the joints in his arms and legs are locked up and will never move or develop. He will never walk or stand. He has limited use of his arms. We will never go fishing, canoeing, or hiking together. Everything that was so important to his mother and I's lives before him will never mean anything to him. In every way, he is so unlike me that I struggle to relate to him at all. When he was born, we both were in shock. He got RSV at 4 months and ended up in the PICU. He wasn't expected to survive. Honestly, his mother and I discussed it and quietly agreed that it would be best that way. We stopped visiting. He's 11 now. Mentally, he's above average. He gets A's in competitive private school. He competes in maths and spelling bees. I hated school. He is cheerful, kind to animals, and unfailingly polite. I was a sarcastic, rude little turd who butted heads with everyone. For some reason, he's still intent on impressing his parents, though I've rarely encouraged him. Despite all his wonderful traits, I still try to avoid seeing him because it makes me feel guilty, depressed, and disappointed. And I feel like crap about that because all his accomplishments tell me is how much I should love him. Anyone else would be thrilled, right? If not thrilled about the medical care, at least impressed with his achievements. I work long hours so that I can provide the best medical care he needs, the best education, anything material he could ever want, and so that I can stay away from him, because I know he knows. He tries so hard that sometimes I'm afraid it's all a front to make it easier for us to like him. Well, at least you can admit you're kind of a crap person.
College Redditors, what's the one high school habit each incoming freshman needs to stop doing on their first day of college? I'll start. No longer are you required to raise your hand and ask to use the restroom. Just get up and leave quietly. Don't wear shirts with your high school name, graduation date, class motto, etc. If you sit in the front row with the laptop, actually pay attention. Do not use Facebook, Reddit, or play Tetris. If you're sick, you don't need a note from your parents. Don't eat loud food in class. Please, please, please follow this one. Don't talk loudly in class. People are there to learn. Keep your high school GPA, sports accomplishments, SAT/ACT scores, and awards to yourself. No one cares. Oh, you were in an AP class? No one cares. You were popular in high school? No one cares. You were a nerd in high school? No one cares. You think your professor is a jerkwad? No one cares. You were prom king? No one cares. In essence, don't take yourself too seriously. Approach college with a sense of humbleness. Don't boast too much about your old self in high school. For the record, when they say no one cares, they don't mean that none of that matters or is worth nothing. It just means that it's not going to affect the friends you make or the activities you participate in. For me, at least, college was a time where I really started to come out of my shell. High school doesn't matter anymore, despite all my dreams taking place there. Your life isn't over if you walk into class late. Just calmly go in and take a seat. You'll be fine. Yes, it will be on the test. After a test, you don't have to stick around. Pack your stuff up and leave quietly. If you're struggling, don't wait to get help. Seriously, if your school is halfway decent, there's at least one other resource outside of your professor that you can consult for tutoring. You will regret letting your pride and/or laziness get in the way of passing a class. Finally, if professors offer to read rough drafts of papers, send or take them a rough draft. Not only will you get suggestions tailored to your professor's grading tendencies, but your professor is also aware that they told you your paper is fine, quote, except for. So if they said that one paragraph looked fine and then realized later it should have been expanded on in some detail, they will probably be more lenient. You sought help, they missed it. Oh well. Besides, you'll become a much better writer hearing suggestions from multiple sources. My essay writing has improved significantly because of my professor's input. Edit. So I forgot this was about habit breaking. Here's a habit to break, so I'm actually answering a question. Don't sleep in class or otherwise ignore your professor. The lectures generally emphasize what your professor thinks is most important and what will be stressed on your tests. Besides, they usually have funny or interesting stories that revolve around the topic. It's fun stuff. Edit 2. Since it seems to be getting mentioned a lot, there are instances in which you do stay after the exam. I suspect, however, your professor will mention it in those circumstances. If in doubt, just ask the professor beforehand. Making up excuses to a professor if you miss the due date for an assignment. It isn't that they aren't listening, it's that they simply will not care. Stop being so embarrassed when your family phones you or comes over. They probably live very far away and came here to see you. Show them some love. Professor here. Number 1. Don't plagiarize. We'll catch you. If we do, fess up. The first several times, the student said, I don't know how that happened. Remember that uncommon knowledge should be cited. Number 2. If the prof asks you to come in for help, do it. We can't help you if you don't. Number 3. I can't tell you how many, quote, smart kids have dropped out. If you get so behind that you feel overwhelmed, talk to someone, anyone, and everyone until you get back on track. You may need professional help. Number 4, get involved. The more connected you are, the better you'll do. Number 5, live on campus if you can. Why? See number 4. Number 6, you'll get some great professors and some crappy ones, no matter what school you go to. If all of them are great, let me know and I'll put my application in. I'm not being egotistical. I just don't like having uncomfortable conversations with students about their bad professors. Also, who one student feels is awful may end up being your favorite. Number 7, take advantage of electives. Try something you may never get to try again. No more raw dogging it. Please wear a condom. This may seem kind of random and out of the blue, but seriously, college campuses are one of the easiest ways to get STDs. There's no shame in nabbing a free condom if there's a table giving them away. The worst habit you can get into is not being safe. You definitely need to study. If you had it easy in high school, it likely will not be that way in college. Putting your phone on vibrate is not the same as putting your phone on silent. Everyone can hear your phone buzz. Everyone can also see you texting during lecture. Hiding your phone under your desk fools no one. Putting on makeup in the middle of class? No one cares anymore. Some people just drag themselves out of bed wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. I actually have a couple tips about this. Number 1, in my acting classes, it was actually standard to wear comfortable clothing like sweatpants and t-shirts. We do a lot of posing, stretching, laying on the floor, etc., so it was important to wear something that you could actually move in. Tip, if you're signing up for an exercise, acting, or dance class, read the syllabus. It is your professor's Bible. Number 2, I was a soundboard operator for a play that had a morning performance, and I ended up waking up about 5 minutes before showtime, so I had no time to get ready. I bolted to the building in my oversized t-shirt and bright red flannels, did my job, and went back to my dorm. Tip, be sure to set your alarm. And also, nobody cares about what you're wearing. I've seen people in class with rainbow He-Man t-shirts on. It's all part of the experience. Stop checking Facebook every 3 seconds. It's amazing how much time it will free up for you. Don't shout out snide comments during class trying to get people to laugh. We don't care if that's what she said. We just want to learn. Here's a tip. After you subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below, don't watch us during class, but you do get brownie points for liking the video and turning on notifications. Thanks for watching. Number 1, be ready to change your major if you need to. What you actually do in a given field of study is often radically different than what you'd imagine. Had a friend go into physics, spent the last 2 years of his degree programming simulations. Switch early enough, and you won't have too many headaches. Number 2, you can sneak into other classes. No one is going to stop or even notice you. Do this a lot, and you'll eventually be able to talk about just anything. Number 3, use the library. Steal from databases. Outside of college, knowledge is expensive, and libraries are sorely underfunded. Number 4, most clubs are kind of BS. Attend anyway. Catch a couple club members outside of the meetings, get a couple drinks in with them, and you'll probably get something closer to what you were looking for. Number 5, even if you're living off of your folks, if you can swing a part-time job, get one. Having a bit of scratch makes having a social life a lot easier, and it's going to stay that way after you graduate, regardless of how cozy you are. Having a social life makes having an intellectual/professional life a lot easier too. The right friends can do wonders for your academic performance. Number 1, make as many friends as possible. Number 2, introduce yourself to your professors. You go from number 8675309 to name. Number 3, no one is in a clique anymore. If they are, screw them. Number 4, if you aren't going to pay attention in class, don't disrupt your classmates with internet conversations or texting. 4.5, professors can easily pick out people not paying attention and will most likely assume that you do not care about your grade. Number 5, don't fall victim to no more parents, no more rules, especially on food. Number 6, going home ain't nothing, but keeping in contact with your parents is. Number 7, find stuff to involve yourself in, but don't involve in all the things. Number 8, you will meet a crap load of people. Even if you don't like them, don't burn the bridge. Number 9, There will always be someone smarter than you. Don't play know-it-all. Maybe not a habit, but a lesson. And I'm sorry if this is a bit negative or heartbreaking. There will be classes that, no matter how hard you try, you will be terrible with. I enrolled as an aerospace major because I wanted to change the world, despite being more of a history/English person. I, by some miracle, passed my second calculus class with a D. I had absolutely no hope with my third calculus class. I had a tutor, I went to study sessions, I went to office hours, I was housed with engineers. But at that point, nothing could teach me how to get from point A to point B. It was basically magic, with some loose logic here and there. I failed that class, despite all my effort. I'm not saying that you will also fail, but that there will be classes that will be nearly impossible to ace. It's very difficult to get all-around A's. But maybe that's just my engineering school. Here, the engineering average GPA is just over 2.0, I believe. And, no exaggeration, the average math test score is 50% or below, so curving is completely necessary. And always check the class average before you panic and wait for the curve. I got a 23 out of 100 on my Calc 2 exam once. The class average was a 10 out of 100. My 23% became an A. You're going to class, not the club. Alternatively, to those same students about 2 months later, you're going to class, not to bed. Giving a crap about what your peers think about you, and having opinions about your peers based on trivial things like whether or not they wear their varsity jacket. But stop asking random people for a piece of gum when they take it out of their bag. Get your own gum. Try not to screw up your grades your first year or you spend the next 3+ trying to make up for it. Also, get involved, but don't overdo it. Not everyone can be involved in and the president of every organization on campus, but try something. Don't just go to class and then screw around in your room. Buy into the whole college experience, please. No, it's totally true. The first year is the easiest to screw up. I spent more time worrying about a particular extracurricular and the fact that suddenly there were parties, tiny high school, barely any social life, and my grades really suffered. Every semester after the first 2, I got better and better grades, but they ruined the pretty average score overall. Can confirm I bombed my first semester, but every semester after that just got better and better. As long as you have people around you to support you, something as new and scary as college won't be as scary. Don't bother sucking up to the professors. While in high school nobody liked teachers' pets, being one could legitimately give you an advantage. In college, you are one of thousands of students that your professor sees daily. If you become the classic suck-up, you're probably not going to be well liked by your classmates, and the professor will just see you as one out of many students, or, worst case scenario, as a bothersome jerk. Don't be afraid of asking your professor anything you don't understand. While they're held to a much higher standard than your normal teachers, they're still human. That doesn't mean you should interrupt them in the middle of a lecture. What I'm saying is that there's nothing wrong going to the professor after class to clear up your doubts. Expect failure. It doesn't matter if you're smart or even a genius. You're going to a whole different environment. It really is a whole new world you're entering, and getting used to it can be tough for some. The world won't end if you get a C on your first test, so chill. For the love of Godzilla, do not call them anything other than professor. Don't call them Mr., don't call them teach, or anything of the sort. Sidebar, this really does depend on the professor. A lot of the professors at my college were on a first-name basis. That's what I love so much about my campus's theater department. Let's go! One last thing. If you're doing any sort of illegal activity, trust no one. I'm not kidding here. Some people will gladly rat you out. Maybe they're prudes that are jealous of you, or maybe they're against what you're doing. Be completely sure you trust who you're hanging out with. You have no idea how many headaches this will avoid. Not giving a crap. I didn't give a crap throughout high school and graduated with the 1 point something or another. I had no intention of going to college. Spent 10 years in the workforce. Made nothing of myself. Job hopped every year. The last job I had was the longest. I worked there for 2 years. I was up for a promotion that was then given to a guy 6 months my junior because he had a degree. At that point, I quit my job and enrolled in community college. The university wouldn't take me. I have recently transferred to said university and am currently maintaining a 3.92 GPA. all because I finally decided to give a crap. If you have a minor disagreement with a professor or find what they're saying is just so interesting, save it for after class. The rest of us really don't give a crap. We just want to get the notes, do the classwork, get the homework, unless it's in the syllabus, and go the heck home. Don't drag us into it. It's boring, and we don't care. And sometimes the professors like to drag the rest of the class into the discussion. Edit, this doesn't apply to discussion-based classes or situations where the professor is outright wrong or inappropriate. Learn to not start a conversation with, "So what's your major?" or at least learn to phrase it differently. Personal pet peeve? Maybe. Do every bit of extra credit offered. If you can redo a bad test for extra points, do it. If you can earn extra points for volunteering at some weird event, do it. If you get extra credit for attending every class session, go to every class session. Use every advantage they give you because every single extra point counts. I'm old and back in school, but as an example, in one of my classes, I did so much extra credit that I only needed a 20% on the final to get an A in the class. That knowledge is incredibly valuable when you have 3 other finals the same week. Send thank you notes/emails to the professors you love, the ones that have made a difference or have gone out of their way to help you. Send it after the class is over and you've received your final grade to avoid impropriety, but do it and be heartfelt about it. They not only appreciate it, but at some point, you may need a reference letter if you're transferring or going on to grad school. I have 2 former professors that will stop me on campus to ask how I'm doing and offer help if I need it. Never forget reference pages. Cite everything you've looked at, even if you're not quoting or using statistics from it, and if needed, buy an APA extension for Word if you suck at formatting. Do not forget references ever. Do not take college like it's on autopilot. It isn't set up for you like high school. You set up your classes, professors, and schedule. Take advantage. Screen your classes and professors so you're not walking into stuff blind. If you end up with a crappy professor or class, you're doing it wrong. Rate My Professor is a beautiful resource. Use it. Also, ask around for recommendations from other students. Your opponent in class is stupid bullcrap. Don't take professors that are jerks or make their class hard just for the sake of doing it. If it's a class that doesn't pertain to your major, find the easy prof and take their class. Bank your easy A for GPA support. If it's a major-related class, get good professors whose classes are only as hard as they need to be. I dissent from the advice here about not being a teacher's pet. I suggest it. Don't kiss up, but take excuses to have sidebar conversations with your professors. Geek out with them. They will think more positively of you, and it can show up in your grade. Not all professors in college grade on purely mathematical formula. As someone who grades a lot of papers and essays, please let me urge you, do not, I repeat, do not fall into the crowd that sets up, quote, teams for classes. I see this all the time, where people say, okay, I'll go Monday, you go Wednesday, etc., and share notes. You are paying to go to class, so go to class. There are a lot of people who do this and get away with it, but you will very likely end up hurting yourself in the long run. You might hurt yourself in the way of not doing as well on a test because your friend didn't take the best notes, in the way of not preparing in a prerequisite class for a later class down the road, or you may be violating the school's academic integrity code. I just want to take a quick second to address that last one because it's very important, and I think a lot of the people who screw up simply didn't take it seriously. Most universities have a zero-tolerance policy for cheating. You may think you're getting away with it, but I want to warn you, teachers/professors do not need to tell you when you're caught. You can go the whole semester thinking you're safe, then suddenly get a nasty letter informing you that you need to go see the Academic Affairs Council. At that point, you are almost certainly hosed, and penalties are usually as severe as possible to use as an example. Please do not underestimate this. It's a lot more serious than high school. Furthermore, if you are farther along in your studies, you can permanently blacklist yourself in the world of academia, potentially losing job opportunities or the ability to go to grad school, which is becoming increasingly necessary. Stop thinking that you're the smartest kid around. You might have been the valedictorian of your high school or whatever, but just because you were the smartest kid there doesn't mean that you're the smartest kid in college. Chances are, everyone else at the school is just as smart as you, if not smarter. Also, don't skip on homework/studying. I was one of those students in high school that rarely did his homework, and I still got good enough grades based on exams that I never had to study for. But in college, those assignments tend to count for a much bigger part of your grade. And most of the time, that homework is going to be much more helpful than high school homework. If you skip the homework, you're likely to have no idea what's going on. As for studying, the exams are much more difficult, and for some classes, the only grades you get are test grades. Mess up on the midterm? Well, you're screwed, since the only other grade is the final. You can't afford to do poorly on one exam, since there's rarely more assignments to buffer your grade. Don't see your professors as, quote, teachers. And in no way do I mean that they're not those who teach, but I mean the fact that, at least for me and many I know, throughout your school career so far, the teachers have been viewed as these much older, almost untouchable people who have this huge status over you. Once I got into college, however, every professor I've had has been very approachable about everything. It feels like talking to an actual human being versus someone who could ruin your life by a single word or sentence. TLDR, don't be afraid to talk to your professors like a normal person. Do not buy your books until you know you are going to use them. I have been swindled one too many times by professors that put expensive textbooks on their required reason lists and never reference them. Along those same lines, never buy textbooks for the campus bookstore. It is ever so much cheaper to order them from Amazon or some similar site. In addition, don't crap on majors that you view as useless or pointless. Telling people, what are you gonna do with X degree? Make coffee? Is not a good way to make friends. Yeah, I've literally had professors be like, hey, I found the textbook you need for this class online as a free PDF, and I'm sending it to the entire class so you don't have to spend $100 on textbooks. Here you go. Those professors are so goated. I love them so much. Thank you.
What made you go from meh to, oh crap, I need to see a doctor? I broke my butt. I slipped and fell down 2 steps of stairs. No big deal. My husband said I needed to fix my pants because it looked off from the back. I broke my sacrum bone above your tailbone, between S3 and S2, and it was sticking out. My doctor had to pop it in. There is nothing that can fix. I have a paralyzed tailbone. I can't feel it. I used to have agonizing leg pain and it would kill me to step sometimes. I chose to ignore it until I was scratching my balls one evening and discovered a lump. I was afraid I had cancer spreading and ran to the doctor. Found out I just had a weird growth on my nut that was not cancer. Leg still hurts though. 4 a.m. Drive heaving. Meh. 8 a.m. Kind of loopy. Have to catch my flight home. Noon. Get wheelchaired off the plane, escorted to connecting flight. 3 p.m. Landed in hometown, wheelchaired out to meet my girlfriend. 5 p.m. Shivering uncontrollably in a scalding hot shower. Abdomen pain so bad I couldn't even stand up straight. 5:30 p.m. Admitted to hospital, got scans and tests overnight. 7 a.m. Appendix surgery. Worst birthday so far. Worst birthday? I think the worst birthday I ever had was when I got hit in the legs with a baseball bat, like actually hit in the legs with a baseball bat when I was 10 years old. But at the same time, I also got a GameCube that day. So maybe not that bad. I passed out at work. I was in my late 40s and a heavy smoker and not much of an exerciser. After a crap ton of tests, my doc told me I had a mini stroke and if I really didn't want to see 50, to just keep up my bad habits. The smoke I had on my way to see him was the last one I ever had, and it's been going that way for 22 years. If you throw up coffee grounds and don't remember eating coffee, you are bleeding internally and should seek help immediately. I was an athlete in college and one time I was at lift, and when I was moving the bar from the side holder on the squat rack, I hit myself in the side of the head, just hard enough. I didn't think much of it, finished my lift and went home. I didn't feel great for the next few days. A few days later, after competing in a track meet, I was at a team barbecue and had the worst headache. After I left, I decided to do some homework with my friend, sat down in front of my computer, fell asleep for about 20 minutes, and when I woke up, I looked at my screen and I was like, holy crap, I can't read. I had a concussion. I was with a friend at a public pond in Boston. She was going to teach me to kayak. We were just getting into the water, barefoot of course, and washing off the kayaks, and she was going to teach me to get into it. I slipped on a rock or something and there was a sharp pain in my foot. Not bad, just real sharp, real quick. I went, wait, I think I stepped on something. Let me look. Lifted my foot up and the water was blood red. My friend was all, we need to get a better look at that. Get to shallow shallow water. I'm going to find a first aid kit or something. I kept insisting it was fine. Really, it barely hurt, but you know how blood in water is. It looks like way more than it actually is. I sat down once the water was shallow enough and put pressure on. Someone came over and was all like, "Are you okay?" And my friend had found a couple dudes nearby who were like, "I got a first aid kit in the car, probably have some butterfly bandages in there. Let's see how bad it is." I brought up my foot out of the water and you could see the layers of skin and fatty tissue kind of flopping about. All four of the folks around me simultaneously went, "Ew," or "Oh my God," or something of the sort. We wrapped a sock around it, quickest thing we could find. Helpful dudes said they'd take care of the kayaks and my friend zipped me to the ER. I seriously did not think it was hurt that bad at all. It was very non-painful when it happened. The recovery was a nightmare, but when it happened, it didn't feel any worse than a small cut or something. In the ER, I'm sitting there with this sock around my foot, and the doctor comes in with 3 students following along behind him. They were in coats, he wasn't. He was all, "Okay, let's have a look." And he unwraps the soaking wet sock from my foot, not water, and I sprayed blood all over him. Even as he backed away, we're talking about a 5-foot arching spray of blood pumping with my heartbeat. It was kind of awesome, actually. Yep, severed an artery. The doc was like, "Well, that's what I get for not wearing my coat. I'll send you a dry cleaning bill." As the 3 students and him were leaving, one says to me, seriously excited, "We've never seen arterial bleeding before. Thanks." You're welcome. Medical students are weird. Bless them. When I was a kid, I used to like taking nice long dumps while playing on my Game Boy. I once stayed on too long. It felt weird. It felt like I was halfway through pooping out a giant turd, which makes you want to push, right? Yeah, bad idea. Apparently, your butt can fold itself inside out like a sock. I thought it was a piece of crap I could grab and pull out, so I wadded up a bunch of TP and tried to pull it out, but it hurt, so I started to panic. Screamed for my parents, went to the ER, sat in the ER waiting room with my guts inside out for a while, and when I finally got in, the doc had me lay down on my stomach. He had no idea what the heck to do. He said he might massage it back in. That phrase is stuck in my head for the rest of my life, and I just remember it folding back in. It was so uncomfortable and cold. Never happened again. It's called a prolapse, and it's awful. That was really hard not to laugh all the way through, but yeah, there's a reason why you shouldn't stay on the toilet too long. One day I went from, my hearing is muffled in one ear, to, now I'm deaf in one ear, to, the room is spinning and I can't stop vomiting. Went to the ER real fast at that point. Now the room has stopped spinning, but I never did get that hearing back. Leg pain went from a nuisance to not being able to stand up. Turns out it was stage 3 cancer. If I had waited another week, I would probably not be around anymore. My doctors did several different types of scans on me. They ended up finding a tumor the size of a grapefruit on the base of my spine. A few days later, they removed it, and I further had 6 rounds of inpatient chemo and a further 6 weeks of radiation treatment. The cancer was called schwannoma neurofibromatocytoma, and yes, I still have my leg. It was basically the same situation as the movie 50-50. Hey, my ankle looks a little swollen. 5 minutes later. Hey, everything under my knee turned into a purple elephant foot. Also, my pee is blood. Kidney failure. Not even once. Didn't have a period for a couple months, more like 6 months to be honest, and thought nothing of it because, well, didn't have to bleed for a week. Yay! Until I had cramps that made me crawl through the house and almost rip my mom's shirt while crying asking to be taken to the hospital. It lasted a couple of hours, but it had to happen twice for my mom to take me to the OBGYN. I went, did the exams, and she said it's totally normal. I had an ongoing period from the end of December to February, but in the last month I had normal periods, so yay! Throw away because TMI and I don't want to think about this after I post. A couple years ago, I noticed that peeing was starting to hurt. I assumed it was a UTI since I've actually had one before when I was much younger, and it felt similar. I heard that a good way to cure or treat a UTI was to drink a metric ton of water so you kind of pee away the germs, and that's what I did. A few days later, I couldn't pee at all, like nothing would come out. Even though I definitely had urine in my body, a panic attack or 2 later, I finally told my mom so she could take me to the ER. I was underage at the time and couldn't drive, and I was also in so much pain, I probably wouldn't have been able to drive even if I knew how. Did you know that catheters suck? Because catheters suck. I went through a lot of physical and psychologically uncomfortable tests, including an ultrasound because one of the possible causes was a cyst on my ovaries. We found nothing, like no causes, at all. We had no idea what was going on. My urethra just decided it didn't want to pee anymore and clamped up, causing immense pain whenever something needed to pass through. Like a ton of water I drank under the impression that it was a UTI. Thankfully, there's a medication specifically for that sort of situation. It numbs up the urethra just enough that I could pee. That combined with the catheter probably saved my life. I wasn't anywhere near exploding bladder status yet, but I damn well could have been. Eventually, after a few days of taking the medication, I was fine, and I've never had that happen since. Kind of an anticlimactic end, to be honest, but it did go from meh to, oh, balls, I need to go to a hospital in the matter of a day or two. In college, just as we were about to start the summer vacation, we had a scheduled week to pick up our grades. This was before electronic grading and all this fancy stuff. We still rolled with report cards. I wasn't feeling too well. I barely could walk and had a head-splitting migraine. I was sure that I was at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit in terms of temperature and was starting to feel chills, all the flu-like symptoms at the start of the summer. I trotted through the day at uni, 6 hours going from class to class, building to building to pick up my grades. On the drive home, I was with my dorm mate who lives in the same hometown as me. We were driving with a family member, and I knew whatever was happening to me was serious as my vision was clouding, and I felt like I was being boiled from the inside. My mom's hospital was nearby and I knew the director personally. I asked the driver to pull over and take me there. By the time we were at the waiting area, I barely could walk and my dorm mates were trying to hold my head. I insisted she go home and ask my family members to fetch my mom. I used the excuse if I had the flu, I didn't want them to be sick. I called my mom, who was upset that I was faking sickness. I always was overly dramatic, but this really felt like death. She was rambling on the phone that I was pulling unnecessary stunts, and I kept saying, "If you want to yell at me, do it here," and hung up the phone. I went up to the director's office, who immediately saw something was wrong. Everything from this point was a blur. I spent 2 hours in the ER, had 2 IVs, and at some point was with a breathing tube. By the time my mom came, she saw me in the ER with all these machines and tubes hooked up, and I ended up being in the hospital for a week. I didn't fully wake up till almost 2 days later. I would come in and out of consciousness, but the bad times where I would have seizure-like coughing fits that wouldn't let me breathe, and back goes the breathing tube. Diagnosis: walking pneumonia with bronchitis infection. I must have had it days before. After I recovered from a slight fever and ignored me coughing up a little blood, the event weakened my already bad lungs so bad it took me a long while to recover. Developed epilepsy in my 20s and couldn't figure out what's been triggering them. A year and a half later and on stable medicine, I'm going on 3 months without a grand mal seizure. I've never had or seen a seizure in real life, but I imagine that is awful to have that regularly. I kept my contacts in for too long, had a headache, and decided to sleep it off. Thankfully, I took out my contacts because when I woke up, it seriously felt like I was hitting the skull with a baseball bat. Any amount of light hurt so frickin' bad. Rushed to the ICU where they looked at my eye and said I had a corneal ulcer. So now I have a very small scar on my eye. It doesn't affect my vision, but I totally learned from sleeping with my contacts in. I had recurring back pain for a couple of years. It would be really bad for a couple of days, then it would go away for a few months. Then last year it came back and didn't go away. I thought it was some kind of musculoskeletal problem and tried to push through it. When I couldn't breathe or walk without assistance, I went to the ER. Both of my lungs were collapsing with 800 mils of fluid on each one, plus some around my heart. Doctors were surprised I was still alive. Bent down to pick up mail I had placed on my stairs, stood up too quickly and got lightheaded, and an hour and a half later I still didn't feel right. Lightheaded, racing heart, shortness of breath, etc. My dad had gone through heart issues less than a year before, and I thought my mind was convincing myself that I was in arterial fibrillation because he had lots of episodes of it, and I knew a thing or two about it. Go to the ER? Yep, a fib. Several hours later, and 2 ineffective chemical cardioversions later, I got an electrical cardioversion defibrillation. They knocked me out, did some cardioversions, and I came around in less than 4 minutes. Woke up feeling like everything was normal again. They kept getting stronger, so I kept popping with Gravel, Pepto, and Advil. One morning I woke up with searing headache pain and reached for my extra-strength liquid Advil, and the bottle was empty. I polished off the whole bottle in less than a week. That's when I realized it was really serious. Turns out it was a brain tumor. Luckily, surgery fixed me up. When I googled what does throat cancer look like, and a bunch of pictures similar to the fleshy lump in the back of my throat came up. About to sleep and my tooth is feeling weird. Hurts a little, but nothing I can't sleep through. I wake up from a nightmare in a deep sweat and my jaw is exploding with pain. I stagger out of bed, somewhat delirious, and collapse on my kitchen floor in pure, unadulterated agony. I've had fingers crushed, bones broken, and skin badly burned before, but nothing has ever come close to how bad toothache hurts. My frickin' God, it was the worst time of my entire life. I had a hot pulp, and my dentist said it was the worst they'd ever seen. Had to have an emergency root canal. Look after your teeth. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm the type of guy that's like, no, I refuse to take an ibuprofen, a painkiller, or what have you if I'm in pain to some degree. It has to be really serious, but consistently, if I have an abscess or something or some kind of tooth pain, then I am just 100% down. Give me the painkillers, please. Level went from, oh damn, this is bad, but I can basically keep it together, to I can no longer give even the slightest appearance that I am okay. That and the EMT buddies I was hanging out with said they were legitimately concerned that I might be dying. Turned out it was a kidney stone. I had been in a minor car accident earlier in the day and hadn't gone to the hospital, so they were concerned that there was internal bleeding or something, and I was going to drop dead from it in front of them. One time I was at work and I felt a touch queasy. No big deal, I'll just sit down and try to eat something. That'll set me right. Nope. I straight fell out of my chair and started flopping around on the floor like a fish. Had a seizure for no reason at all, or none that the doctor could find. Had a killer migraine for weeks and was constantly dizzy, and I doubt I'll ever know why it happened. I had an annoying pain on the right side of my back that moved to the right side under my rib. I knew it was gas. The next morning it was still there. I laid down to move the gas. That made it worse. I started having horrible pain in the middle of my chest. Thought I was having a heart attack. Vomiting, etc. There was a point where I thought I was going to pass out because I couldn't take the pain anymore. A few days later, I was talking to my husband and decided to look up the symptoms because I was still a little sore. I went to the doctor and had to go to the hospital for an ultrasound. I had a bad gallbladder attack. Kinda gross, but my first bleeding UTI, I went from, I'll drink lots of cranberry juice to, oh no! I love cranberry juice, but you can't drink too much of it because it makes you spit all viscousy and horrible. I had rosacea. After around 5 years, I grew out of it. At around the same time as I stopped eating dairy. Then I decided I really missed cheese. The rosacea came back, but all over my whole face and neck, along with a strange, intense itchiness that I'd never experienced. And hives. Had my, oh crap, I need to see a doctor moment real goddamn quick. In December of 2007, I had a really bad calf strain. Got so bad I could barely put weight on it. I had a deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot in a deep vein in my leg, it turned out. My left leg started to lose feeling, first from at the toes and worked its way up over the course of a couple days. There was no pain, just tingling. No pain, no doctor, right? That's what I thought until I tried to stand up and my leg just buckled. Time to get that checked. Went to the ER, had an MRI, had a ruptured disc that, and I quote, obliterated my spinal cord, and I was hours away from permanent nerve damage or paralysis. Had surgery immediately, all is well now. Low-key, I'm so worried this topic is going to turn me into a hypochondriac. I just know that when I'm done reading this, the slightest pain in my body is just going to set off alarm bells. I was sore in my pelvis, think between my left leg and the base of my wiener. Thought I must have rammed it into the bag hooks while working behind the register. It didn't get better though, and I thought I must have kept running into it while I wasn't looking. I got to the point where I couldn't tie my shoes, run, or wear seatbelts. It also looked like a frickin' golf ball was under my skin. I was driving a Del Sol at the time, which was not an ergonomic masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. It frickin' killed having to sit in that position. Working a clutch and wearing a seatbelt made it worse. I went to the doctor. Eventually, they found out I had a really agitated lymph node that couldn't be relieved. I had recently found out I was PAWS, and that can happen sometimes, even when the numbers look good. I needed surgery to remove it. Turns out it was the size of a robin's egg, which is apparently big for a lymph node. All the rest was swelling. No cancer, no nothing. It was just an agitated lymph node. I've been sick with mono for 2 weeks. I didn't go to the doctor or suspect anything was wrong until I woke up one day and I was jaundiced like crazy. Turned out the monovirus was attacking my liver and affecting enzyme production, making me throw up frequently as well. Got stung by a bee while riding a motorcycle on my way to work. My dad is very allergic and I'm a bit allergic myself, but only very rarely have serious reactions to it. Meh. Half an hour later at work, my bicep was uncharacteristically swole, like Arnie, and the veins in my arm were bright, inflamed, and red. Yep, Supervisor told me to get gone. I tried to find a doctor in the box that wouldn't take all of my savings, and after a bit of driving around with this ridiculous bee-stung arm, got treated. Fun times. I used to fall asleep in class ever since I can remember. Just thought, hey, school is boring. Fast forward, I'm 21 years old and still falling asleep in classes. Anytime I have to drive anywhere over an hour long and have to pull over to take naps, would fall asleep at work daily, and just felt extremely exhausted 24/7. I just thought, hey, this must be what it's like to be an adult. Tired all the time and just wanting to sleep. Bet it'll only get worse from here. Then one day, I fell asleep mid-sentence talking to my boss. I played it off to him like I was sick and just passed out for a moment. Went to the doctors and did some sleep studies. Turns out, I have narcolepsy. I woke up for work on a Friday morning with a tickle in my throat. After work, I traveled to Boston for a pre-planned weekend trip, my throat and tonsils swelling more the entire time. I get home on Sunday not being able to swallow my own saliva without almost crying. I did cry at times. Monday morning, there's a massive blizzard and everything is closed, except a walk-in clinic. I forced my significant other to help me drive through 24-plus inches of snow because it was really unbearable. The doctor there said I had the worst tonsils he's seen in years, and that if it keeps swelling, I should go to the ER. Turns out I had a really bad case of tonsillitis due to undiagnosed mono. Vertigo. Was getting my daughter ready for school when suddenly it felt like I drank a gallon of moonshine and couldn't even stand up. Room spinning, the works. Meclizine is life now. Also, I can't ride simulators or use VR anymore. That kinda sucks. I got earaches a lot. Most of the time, I'm meh about it. Take some Tylenol and go about my life. One time in particular, though, it moved into an ear infection in under 8 hours. I've had ear infections before, but nothing compared to the pain I was feeling that evening. I paced around the room in tears for about 2 hours before giving up and going to urgent care, where I got medication for my ear along with pain medication. I'll never forget the exact moment that the pain medicine kicked in. It was absolute bliss. One night in college, I went to an exceptionally crazy forest party, drank way too much and ended up blacking out. I was obviously extremely hungover and in a lot of pain, so I went home, drank a bunch of water, and slept for a few hours. When I woke up, I had super intense pains in my abdomen, and I chalked it up to it being from my drinking. Fast forward 2 days later, and I'm in too much pain to leave my apartment. Every time I move, it's painful. After 3 days of this, and I go to the campus health center, they ran some tests but couldn't find anything wrong, but told me to go to the ER. When I go to the ER, they have no clue and give me fluids and send me home. I return in about an hour since the pain is so terrible. They do a colonoscopy and find out I have huge kidney stones. Took me another week with pain meds and prostate meds, I'm female by the way, to pass them.
History buffs of Reddit, what is one of the most fascinating stories you've learned that no one seems to talk about and can't be found in textbooks? The Lake Peigneur disaster. Until 1980, Lake Peigneur was a small-ish freshwater lake with a maximum depth of about 10 to 15 feet, located in southern Louisiana. Locals mostly used it for trout fishing, and it also had a canal running 10 miles from the lake southward to the Gulf of Mexico. The main industry of the area was a massive salt mine that stood below the ground, partially underneath the lake itself. Thing is, natural salt deposits like this often coincide with oil reserves, so it wasn't out of the ordinary when oil companies came searching. In November of 1980, Texaco had set up a rig in the lake and was doing some exploratory drilling, hoping to make bank. Little did they know that one of their triangulation coordinates was slightly off, and so they had incorrectly guessed the location of the salt mine below their feet. Their drill bit punched into the roof of the salt deposit about 400 feet earlier than expected, and water began to drain slowly into the salt. And what happens when salt meets water? It dissolves. As the water dissolved more and more salt, it made more and more room for water to be sucked down, which in turn dissolved more salt and made more room, setting off a massive chain reaction. The oil rig on the surface keeled to the side and collapsed, its workers barely escaping before the water pressure became too much to swim through. The remnants of the rig were sucked into the bottom of the lake in what had turned from a tiny hole to a whirlpool, the force of the water shearing away soil and making a bigger hole as it went. The salt mine at the time was fully staffed with workers 1,500 feet below the ground, who were going about their daily shifts in the mine without any knowledge of the events taking place above them until they saw water dripping through the roof of the tunnels. Thanks to well-rehearsed evacuation plans, none of them died before the mine was flooded, but water is just about the worst thing you can see in a salt mine. The whirlpool on the surface, having eaten the rig, began to suck down the entire contents of the lake itself, including 11 barges, various small boats, and yes, the poor trout. The whirlpool grew into a maelstrom, its pressure increasing and in turn building more pressure by creating a bigger and bigger hole, eroding more and more of the salt mine. As it pulled down the entire lake, the water began to shear away at the shores, creating landslides and tearing trees out by the roots. Many of Jefferson Island's 100-year-old pecan trees were lost to the maelstrom, along with several local homes that sat on the shore of the lake and were ripped out by the foundation. The local botanical gardens was destroyed entirely as the soil underneath it was eroded in the span of only a few hours. Compressed air inside the mine finally exploded out through the mine shafts, quickly followed by a 400-foot geyser erupting from the mine's entrance. Not only did Lake Peigneur drain entirely into the mine, dragging 64 acres of destroyed land with it, but the pressure was so great that it also reversed the direction of the Decom Canal. The ocean water from the Gulf of Mexico rushed northward through the canal to fill the Peigneur Basin, temporarily creating the largest waterfall in Louisiana. The chaos didn't end until the pressure equalized about a week later. When things had finally calmed down, the lake had changed drastically. Its maximum depth was now about 200 feet, as opposed to its previous 10. Its shoreline had expanded, chimneys sticking straight out of the water where the houses had once been. 9 out of the 11 barges claimed by the maelstrom floated back to the surface, although 2 remained somewhere in the ground below. The botanical gardens were gone, and many of the local trees. The salt mine was temporarily shut down, and although it did reopen, it was finally closed permanently in 1986. Texaco had to pay $32 million to the salt company and a further $13 million to the gardens. Miraculously, the only casualties of the disaster were the trout. The most important difference, however, is that today, Lake Peigneur is now a saltwater lake with ocean species 10 miles away from the ocean itself, all caused by some bad numbers and a 14-inch drill bit. Leave your mark on history and subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. Be sure to like the video and turn on the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching! I wish more people realized how truly post-apocalyptic life after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire was. In Britain, we had large cities made of masonry, aqueducts, running water, lawyers and accountants, central heating, financial derivatives, a thriving civilization. After the collapse, we lost all of that. The plumbing and concrete broke down, nobody knew how to fix it. People built mud huts inside old stadiums and amphitheaters, using them as forts. That's some Diamond City stuff right there. It took centuries for the economy to recover to the point that currency was needed again, rather than bartering. A side point, back in the day, York and Thebes were in the same country. That still blows my mind. Starfish Prime. That time when a space nuke could be seen from Hawaii and the resulting EMP knocked out streetlights in Waikiki. Almost no one I know knows about this, and it wasn't in any school books we read. You'd think a space nuke, to see if we could blow up an asteroid belt, would make it into textbooks, especially when tens of thousands of people witnessed a sun in the sky at nighttime. The quote, May incident in World War II. American submarines were very good at getting away from Japanese surface ships. This was because the Japanese thought American submarines could only reach a much shallower depth than they actually could, and they could never set their depth charges to these deeper depths. Congressman Andrew May decided it would be a good idea to hold a press conference announcing this fact. From then on, the Japanese set their depth charges to these deeper depths. Quote, Vice Admiral Charles A. Lockwood, commander of the U.S. submarine fleet in the Pacific, estimated that May's security breach cost the United States Navy as many as 10 submarines and 800 crewmen killed in action. He said, I hear Congressman May said the Jap depth charges are not set up deep enough. He will be pleased to know that the Japs set them deeper now. Loose lips sink ships. Voyagers who worked for fur trade companies lived gross lives. Since they spent most of their time in a canoe with limited supplies, they made do with what they had. Gross stuff below. They were often missing teeth, so when they drank tea, they would shove a chunk of maple sugar in their teeth gaps and drink tea through it. When the tea was done, they would remove the sugar chunk, wrap it up, and save it for later. The number one cause of death for a voyager was complications of hernia because they carried heavy cargo on their backs. The average sack was 90 pounds, and they would make a contest out of who could carry the most. Often 3, and for the show-offs, 4 packs. That's 360 pounds of cargo, so of course, guts would herniate. They would tie their sashes as tight as possible around their stomach to keep all their internal organs in place. Since they try to keep limited supplies so they could carry the most cargo, they would often use their toques as bowls. They would wax the yarn to waterproof the hats, so they would eat out of their hat that had hair, sweat, skin, and probably bugs in it. They didn't pull over to the shore to go to the bathroom. When you had to go, you would go over the side of the canoe. This applies for both number ones and number twos. So if you had to poop, you were pooping in front of the rest of your crew. Their hygiene was awful. They often would not bathe or clean themselves up, as it protected their skin from bugs and the sun. When they got close to a rendezvous point, they would somewhat attempt to shave and clean themselves up. They made do with what they had, but learning about them has made me appreciate modern amenities like showers, toilets, and access to health and dental care. Edit, holy crap, I got gold. I know this is cliche, but thank you. Here's some quick fun Voyager facts as a thank you. They paddled about 50 strokes per minute, and the person who could carry a tune and played the fiddle were paid the best. They used music to keep pace and move faster. In Canada, there were two main fur trade companies, Hudson Bay Company and Northwest Company. Those two companies hated each other and would get in fights all the time. Turf wars were a real thing. They were often under 5'7" because having tall people in the canoe made it difficult, and it was harder work for tall people because it took more effort to swing the paddle down. And lastly, this song, Chevalier de la Table Ronde, translated to Knights of the Round Table, was their jam. It's about when they die, they want to be buried with all the wine and their head under a tap. Gross party animals to the end. It's a bit more recent, but I love the story of Gander. After 9/11, all the planes were grounded. Almost 7,000 people, which was about 66% of the local population, were forced to land in this tiny town of Gander, Newfoundland. The whole town worked together to make sure all the passengers would have everything they needed. The local ice rink was filled with frozen food that people donated. You couldn't find a closed door in town for stranded people to take a shower or just talk. Once the grounding of planes was lifted, those passengers pooled their money together and created a scholarship for the people of Gander to use. This is one of the greatest acts of kindness that I can view in history. To this day, Gander is the only place outside the United States where they have a piece of the World Trade Center. This is the story of the biggest troll who ever lived. In World War II, there was a Spanish spy named Juan Pujol Garcia who approached the Allies to work for them. When they refused, he approached the Nazis, and they accepted him, giving him the codename Arabelle. Once he earned credentials working as a Nazi spy, he approached the Allies again, this time getting a job as a double agent, codenamed Garbo. This is where it gets unbelievable. He fed the Germans a combination of misinformation, true but useless information, and high-value information that always got to the Germans just a little too late. He even started a spy network consisting of 27 sub-agents of his own. Keep in mind that not a single one of these sub-agents existed. They were completely imaginary. But regardless, he submitted expense reports for them and had the Nazis giving him money to pay their salaries. At one point, when he had to explain why some high-value information got to the Germans late, he told them that one of his spies had died. He actually got the Germans to pay the imaginary spy's imaginary wife a very real pension for her loss. Not only did his false information get the Nazis to waste millions of dollars, but he was also instrumental in convincing the Nazis that the attacks on D-Day were just a diversion, and the real attack was yet to come, keeping vital German resources away from the front lines. He is one of the only people to ever get an Iron Cross from the Germans, which required Hitler's personal authorization since he wasn't a soldier, and an MBE from King George VI. The Battle of Attu. It was the only battle of World War II fought on US soil. Attu is an island in the Aleutians. The Japanese invaded it intending to… who the heck knows, it was far too remote to serve as a staging for an invasion of the mainland. The American soldiers who were sent there had originally been slated to go to North Africa. They were sent to the Arctic, in the spring, with gear meant for fighting in the desert. They lost more men to the elements than to the Japanese. I'm a nurse, and a few years ago I had a resident who was in this battle. To his dying day, he was reluctant to talk about it, even 70 years later. What I shared here is all he would tell me. Peter the Great often forced dwarves to get married, and him and his friends would get drunk and attend the wedding. He had a fascination with dwarves, and he once forced someone who had made him angry to marry a dwarf. Edit. Since this post is getting a lot of attention, I thought I'd share that Peter basically had a fraternity, and it was called the all-joking, all-drunken synod of fools and jesters. They would drink and party basically all the time. You can find more about it on Wikipedia. During World War II, the Japanese outfitted special planes. Some were designed to be launched from submarines, with enough range to reach the west coast of the United States. The goal was to use incendiary bombs to start wildfires in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. One pilot, Nobuo Fujita, successfully dropped his bombs over the forest near Brookings, Oregon. Fortunately, a storm the night before had dampened the forest, and the fire started by Fujita's bomb was quickly controlled by the Forest Service. 18 years later, in 1962, Fujita returned to Brookings. He brought with him his family's heirloom, a katana that was over 400 years old. Fujita apologized to the townspeople for his actions during the war and revealed that if the townspeople demanded it, he would ceremoniously kill himself, commit seppuku, with the sword to make reparations for his actions. The townspeople would have none of it. Fujita was made an honorary citizen of the town and returned to visit it several times during his life, including one trip to plant trees in the forest he had bombed decades before. After his death in 1997, his daughter returned to Brookings and scattered some of his ashes there. The Fujita family katana is on display in Brookings, after being given to the town by Fujita as a token of friendship. I may not be too much of a history buff, but I really like the story of Leo Major. Leo was a Canadian soldier serving in World War II. He was assigned to the division in charge of liberating the Netherlands. One day in the summer of 1944, he was alone on reconnaissance duty when he saw two German soldiers walking nearby. He killed one and captured the other, then captured their commanding officer and an entire German garrison after killing a couple more. He came under fire from other German soldiers and just kept walking. He single-handedly captured 93 German soldiers. In February of 1945, a truck Leo was in hit a landmine. He broke his back, a few ribs, and both ankles, and was told he would be discharged. Leo couldn't give enough craps, however, and a week later, he snuck out of the field hospital he was in and stayed with the Dutch family. After getting better, he made it back into his battalion and volunteered to do reconnaissance on the city of Zwolle. Once he departed, he decided to take the city himself. He convinced a German soldier to relay a message back to the German army, then through the night ran around the town making all the noise he could. He shot bullets, threw grenades, captured German soldiers, burned down the Gestapo, and cleaned out the SS building in Zwolle. His tactics were so effective, he convinced the German army that the entire Canadian army was invading the town, so by the morning, the town was free of Germans and the Canadian army just marched in. He has a street named after him in that town now. From Wikipedia, he declined the invitation to be decorated because according to him, General Montgomery, who was to give the award, was, quote, incompetent and in no position to be giving out medals. I like the cut of this guy's jib. Diarrhea was so widespread and common in the 19th century that people would develop opium habits because opium makes you constipated. Edit, well that escalated quickly, and for the exact diseases and reasons that people had diarrhea, I can only say that the 19th century was gross and nobody knew proper sanitary practices. I'm glad you guys all enjoyed debating Imodium, and today I learned Imodium is made from opiates. If you want to learn more about opium, diarrhea, or the combination of the two, then Google it because I'm busy and Google has better resources than I. I've told this story before, but it never fails to amuse me. Strap in, boys and girls. It's time to learn about that time in pre-revolutionary France where bleeding from your anus was a fashion statement. In early 1685, King Louis XIV of France developed a fistula, a small channel near his anus, resulting in great pain. Fistulas, much like the Wu-Tang Clan, ain't nothing to screw with. Eventually, the pain got so bad that he couldn't ride a horse, sit for long periods, which is kind of important when you're a king, or even make a bowel movement without regretting it immensely. The normal remedies were applied, enemas and poultices from morning until night with zero effect. Louis decided, you know what? Screw it. Let's go down the surgical route. Unfortunately for Louis, at the time, there was no surgical route. He hired a surgeon barber named Charles Francois Felix and asked him to fix him. Not entirely stupid, and not willing to risk screwing up a novel surgery on the King of France, Felix requested 6 months to practice, which he did on prisoners. Live healthy prisoners. Sometimes as many as 4 a week, in an era where antiseptics and anesthetics didn't exist. The success rates were about as you'd imagine, although at least some of the prisoners survived, and eventually Felix felt confident enough to perform the surgery on the king. And it worked! Within 3 months, the king was riding his horse like nothing had happened, and Felix was the talk of the town. People were desperate to emulate the king so badly that people who were entirely healthy would pay Felix to perform the surgery on them, and those less willing to suffer, or at least less willing to pay, would fake having the surgery, wearing bandages known as les royales to mimic the king, and pretend that they too were cool and with it, even though with it meant suffering from a painful condition of the anus. When Philip of Macedon had ravaged many Greek city-states, things were looking bad for Greece. He then turned his attention to Sparta, sending the doomed state a letter that read, "You are advised to submit without further delay, for if I bring my army into your land, I will destroy your farms, slay your people, and raze your city." The Spartans sent back a rather to-the-point reply, "If." It's actually more cool even than that. That was the second message of that particular exchange. In the first, Philip asked the Spartans whether he should come to Sparta as a friend or as a foe. Their reply? Neither. Robert Liston, 1794 to 1847. A surgeon. In fact, he was described as, quote, the fastest knife in the West End, and could amputate a leg in 2.5 minutes. The faster the surgery, the more likely the recovery. Though during this particular amputation, he went so quickly he also removed his patient's testicles. However, he also amputated a man's leg in less than 2.5 minutes, who would later die of gangrene. In his haste, he accidentally cut off his assistant's fingers, who would later die from gangrene, and, apparently, cut through the coattails of a surgical spectator who was so scared he died of fright. This becoming the only surgery with a 300% mortality rate. Was he performing a surgery with a broadsword or something? It's time for the most ambitious crossover in the world. The Battle for Schlossiter, or Castleiter. If anyone told you that tankers from the 12th Armored Division of the United States fought alongside German Wehrmacht soldiers led by an SS Hauptsturmführer, as well as French POWs to defend a castle with the famous tennis player of the time, 2 former prime ministers of France, and Charles de Gaulle's sister, against an attacking force of the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, you'd have called BS upon BS upon BS. But that is exactly what happened. In a small castle near Idar in Austria, the high-profile prisoners were segregated in the latter part of the war. In May, a prisoner escaped with a letter to Allied forces detailing the names and location of the high-value imprisoned French citizens. The first Allied unit he encountered was unable to effect a rescue, but started toward the prison before retreating back behind Allied lines. During this time, the head of the prison died under, quote, mysterious circumstances, and the second-in-command deserted, along with the host of SS guards. The prisoners, meanwhile, had taken over the prison and commandeered the arms left behind. In the nearby town, Wehrmacht troops, sick of the war and the Nazis, had deserted and formed a resistance unit that protected the citizens from Nazi hardline loyalists and SS retaliation. Major Joseph Sepp Gangl approached a unit of the 12th Armored under a flag of truce and requested aid. Captain John Lee agreed immediately, positioning his tanks at the city square as a show of force. Advised of the tenuous situation in the former prison, Lee set off with a number of tanks, but was unable to cross a small rickety bridge leading to Castle Idar with all his forces. He proceeded with this tank, the Besseton Jenny, 2 squads of riflemen, Major Gangl, and a truck with a 10-man Wehrmacht Kannonkocher crew. On the way, they encountered a group of SS troops attempting to blockade the road, who they promptly ventilated. Arriving at the castle, the captain and the major were greeted by the unlikely sight of French prisoners working side by side with Hauptsturmführer Kurt Siegfried Schrader to shore up the castle defenses. The motley crew was not best pleased with the, quote, rescue force that didn't even quite make up a full platoon, but were happy to see any reinforcement. Lee staged his tank at the castle entrance, and the POWs, the Wehrmacht, and the 12th Armored crew deployed around the castle into defensive perimeter. The crap was on. The next morning, a Waffen-SS group numbering over 100 launched their assault, one of the opening salvos destroying the tank that had been the heavy weapon support for the Castle Idar defenders. The attack continued in waves, with probing during the night to find weakness in the defenders' lines. Even after being ordered by Captain Lee to seek shelter in the castle, the French POWs stayed on the front, pouring a heavy volume of fire at the attacking SS troops. Morning after pillbox, the following day opened bleakly, with sporadic gunfire continuing throughout the night, as well as repeated grenade blasts and 88mm cannon fire. The defenders were running low on ammo. Somehow, the telephone lines back to the nearby town had not been destroyed, and comms remained intact for the duration of the battle. Lee and Gangle called back for the reinforcements, and they arrived in the afternoon to stomp a mudhole in SS butt. The strangest battle of an insane war came to a close. It was 5 days after the Führer died from self-inflicted high-velocity lead poisoning, and 2 days before the official surrender of Germany.
What was your best or worst time in a game of Truth or Dare? In 4th grade, we were playing Truth or Dare on the bus home from school. Someone dared my friend to lick the floor of the bus, and sure enough, he did it. I thought about that moment the whole time he gave his class president speech at high school graduation. I played Truth or Dare with a mixed group of kids. I was spending the night at a friend's house whose older sister was also having a sleepover. We were 3 years younger, and we were at that age where avoiding the girls was the safest bet. I think 12 or 13. Anyway, the girls dragged me and my 2 friends into a game of Truth or Dare. After about half an hour of stupid dares, it got serious, and one girl was ordered to take me into the closet and make a man out of me. I was terrified and not even too sure what I was in for. The girl took me into the closet, sat down next to me, and held my hand, said we weren't going to do anything, and we just sat there for the next 20 minutes as the game continued on outside. I think she could sense how scared and embarrassed I was. They knocked on the door a few times, but she would scream at them to go away. The entire time we were in there, we talked about how stupid the game was and that she was sorry I got singled out. When we finally left after the others got bored with the game, she explained the whole thing away by saying that she just chickened out. And we talked to each other the whole time. The way she explained it, it didn't even become a thing. And the night was as uneventful as any other night. She saved me loads of shame and embarrassment at an age that would have ruined me. I love her for this, even though I don't know her name. I think this qualifies as both my best and my worst. Damn. Oh, damn, we are wholesome. We are getting wholesome up in here right now. So my friend has a party at his house, and nearly everyone was invited, including my crush at that time. My friend knew I had a crush on her, so when the dare came to me, that SOB dared me to leave for home, and I had to leave. One time in middle school, we're on the school bus and someone proposes to play a game of Truth or Dare. One girl stands up and says, "I'll kiss anyone on this bus except for him," while pointing at me. That was 16 years ago, and I still think about it. 1. Found out my crush had a thing for me. She chose truth. I asked her, "Do you want to go on a date with me?" Silence for a second, then a smile, then a yes. 2. Worse was when my dumb friend fell on me while doing a dare of jumping off the table, resulting in him breaking his ribs and my foot. Oh god, I basically had the exact same experience at a sleepover I had when I was a kid, where my hyperactive friend was jumping around all over the place and he jumped directly on my knee, and I hated him all frickin' night. It made it really hard for me to enjoy my birthday gift of SSX on tour for the PS2. Although I actually wanted it on GameCube because you could play as Mario, Peach, and Luigi, I think, as exclusive characters for the GameCube version, but beggars can't be choosers, so whatever. I thought that was just cool at the time when I was a kid. Video game crossovers. I was at a summer camp, and we would all join with small groups that we would meet with in the morning after breakfast to help plan out the days. On the 3rd or maybe 4th day, we were all getting pretty close and decided to play a game of Truth or Dare. Our group met down by the lake, and we were all sitting with our feet in the water, and someone was dared to catch a minnow with a net. Nothing crazy or anything. However, immediately after the minnow was caught, it was my turn, and I chose dare, admittedly, because I was hoping my friend would ask me to kiss my crush, who was also in our small group. Instead, being the little turd that he was, he dared me to eat the minnow, and seeking the approval of my peers, I did it and swallowed the minnow whole with my hot cocoa. If eating a live minnow wasn't bad enough, a couple rounds go by and my crush is dared to kiss me, to which she replied, "Ew, I'm not kissing minnow boy." That became my nickname for the next week and a half. I never got the kiss, to say the least, and I still wonder to this day if that's what gave me the tapeworm that they found a year later. I don't know what it is about that story, but for some reason it just sounds so goddamn real to me. New Year's Eve 1995, I was dared to kiss a guy that all my friends were crushing on, and I really wasn't. I smooched his lips and everyone was like, "That wasn't a kiss." So I went in deep and hard for a second one. I was 14 and he was 16. We've been together ever since. He followed me to college. I followed him out of state for work. We moved back home at 25 and 27, got married. Here we are in 2021, still together. It's so bizarre. Well, goddamn. Lady, I'm gonna need you to recreate that kiss because I gotta know what kind of voodoo magic you put into that to get that boy to batten down the hatches at the age of 16. I was around 14 and a girl from my school hosted a class party. I had hit puberty really early and looked pretty mature for my age, which came with getting a lot of attention from older guys, which made a lot of my peers assume that I had some experience and extra confidence. We played Truth or Dare and I was dared to kiss this boy in my class who hadn't hit puberty, had braces, and generally didn't match my maturing. I think he expected me to refuse, but I had actually been crushing on him and found him really cute, including that I hadn't actually kissed anyone before, despite what everyone believed. We both leaned in on all fours from opposite sides, and I could see the huge and boyish smile that formed on him, and it felt really safe and comfortable, and to this day, I'm glad that was my first kiss. So we had a group date thing and someone dared the entire group of like 8 people to share their kinks, and eventually someone said scat, and as I guessed it, party was over. We used one of those apps that gives you a question or dare randomly, and one person got the dare to hug the person to her right, me, and refused. I was playing with my 2 best friends and would really have liked a hug. I'm sorry to say, my friend, but clearly you were not hug-worthy that day. I was at a friend's birthday party. We were playing Truth or Dare. When it was my turn, I got dared to kiss this guy. He was my best friend's crush. I looked over to her and she hinted that it was okay. A few rounds later, it was the guy's turn. He got dared to kiss the girl opposite him. It was me. Then it was his turn again, but he had to spin a bottle to choose who he would make out with. Everyone was chatting or otherwise distracted except for me and that friend. He span it landed on my friend, but he span it again, and it landed on me. Back then, I had a crush on a girl that lives in the upper floor in the same apartment with me. One day, my mom and her friends were sitting in our living room and talking about some stuff while I was playing with other kids in my room. So we decided to play Truth or Dare. I was the only male in the group, and we were 6 kids around the same age, 11 to 14. Of course, my crush was sitting next to me. Suddenly, I found myself being asked Truth or Dare. I said truth, and the girl asked the question, have you ever bought a present for your crush? And of course, I was an idiot, and without even thinking, I asked my crush if I've ever bought a present for her. Everyone went crazy, and I was still waiting for a reply. When I realized the shocking reality, I ran away from home and did not show up until I thought they would be gone. I still remember this being so embarrassing and blaming myself for being an idiot. And for those who were saying it would have been smooth if I didn't run away, actually, you're right, but this whole situation was not planned. Also, for people wondering what happened next, I tried to cry but couldn't. After a few days in the neighborhood, all the girls were talking crap about me, and one of them was my sister. Also, my crush did not talk to me for some days as far as I remember. Lastly, now our moms still talk to each other, but we live in different towns, so I do not see her that much. I get it, man, when you're a little boy, why face your problems head on when you can run away? As Edward Elric would say, you've got a strong pair of legs on you. Use them to run away from your problems forever. I was given the dare to ask insert crush here out to prom over the phone since she was in quarantine and on speaker. So I called, turned on the video so all she could see was me. I grab a paper that says prom on it and the words she says shocked me. I've been waiting for this. Yes! And that is the best moment of Truth or Dare. I'm actually really appreciating how wholesome some of these are. It's not just teenagers asking each other to do debaucherous things to one another. I mean, there is certainly some of that, but most of these are turning out okay. Adolescence is a confusing time for everyone, and for 2 or 3 years, I was friends of friends with someone who I thought was cute but often mean to me. The saintly nerd boy who thinks the best of everyone. I went from being, oh hey, blank, to being quite anxious, feeling confused as to why I was seemingly getting picked on, and a little excited that I was the object of her attention, positive or otherwise. Time passes, and she ends up at a party where Truth or Dare is played, and maybe it's just 6 of us or fewer, but none of our common friends are there. We're asked to make out, seemingly to make me squirm, and it's only then that I find out I know nothing about the world and that flirting or being a little interested in someone takes many forms. I wouldn't see her many times after that, but the flipped switch in self and social awareness was appreciated, not to mention the making out part. A year ago, there was this party with friends, half boys, half girls, and we were extremely bored and decided to play Truth or Dare with this random app. And at first, the dares were just eat a banana with, pickle juice, and then it got real spicy with hug a girl or hold hands for 5 minutes, which I wasn't expecting. I got the lightly kiss, and it was my crush, so someone had a good night. The time I was dared $200 to jump off my roof. Ow, $200 and a couple of broken arms later? I was rich and popular. The best game of Truth or Dare from high school ended up with one of my female friends wrapped up like a mummy in toilet paper. My best friend having a silly-looking face drawn on his chest and stomach. I had to eat a tablespoon of some gross concoction of condiments in that person's fridge, and I think one person had to stand on their head for as long as they could. Those are all the ones that are really memorable to me. The best time was me, male, 8th grade, playing Truth or Dare on the train home, except I wasn't playing. I was just doing my homework, sitting with all my friends. It was like 7 girls and 2 dudes, and normally we'd play Truth or Dare, and we've pretty much all kissed each other at that point. One of my friends, however, had an older sister, 2 grades above us, and her sister's friend was my crush. She had a ridiculous body, big lips, and wore super glossy lipstick, so every day was a struggle for me when she sat with us, and I usually resolved this dilemma by putting in headphones and doing my homework in solitude. Well, apparently she got hit with Dare, and one of my homegirls, the wingman, frickin' angel that she is, dared her to French kiss me for 10 seconds. Fam, I have had pecks, I have had basic kisses, but I have never done that up until that point. On top of this, I wasn't even playing, and I didn't even hear them. So I wasn't aware of any of this when she started doing what she did. So imagine you're me, sitting on a train doing homework when all of a sudden your crush, who you've been ignoring, gets frustrated, straddles you in a tight train seat, takes off your headphones, stares you dead in your eyes, and says, okay. You're sitting there like, what? And she just starts tonguing you. And I mean, she's really going in, and I'm like, what the hell? So my mini-me immediately hits her, and she blushes and gets off of me, but not before throwing my jacket over it. Saint! I can't remember most of the crap from middle school, but I will remember that moment forever. Worst time would probably be when one member of the group, there were 5 of us, admitting a ton of either dark or overly personal stuff on Truth. Like, you don't have to specify the gross SX thing you did or what illegal substances you have experience with. You can omit information that doesn't make the night better for anyone. Worst, and I carry this almost 30 years, back when I was 12 or 11 years old, someone dared me to dance with a girl. I was so freaked out that I rejected. Later, that party, the girl asked me to dance, slow dance, and somehow I accepted. And that guy just screamed and clapped, well done! I must say, he didn't mean any harm. Again, I freaked out, my shyness level skyrocketed, and I aborted the dance again. Since then, I didn't dance with girls, even had some hard times talking to girls romantically. And the next slow was with my newlywed wife and our wedding some 20 to 25 years later. I was dared to be hit over the head with a Coke bottle, one of those glass ones. Got a concussion. That's stupid. That's a stupid dare. The only kind of person that would make that dare to you is someone that actively hates you. When I was in 8th grade, I tried to enter in one game with some people in my class. I got expelled from the group. I was the weirdo outcast from my class. So I tried to play some games on my cell phone and listen to some music in my earphones. Just forget and chill. While I tried to find some music, I listened to the request from the group. Truth or Dare? Dare. I dated Kiss Leo, my real name. Disgusting noises ensue. I just remember listening to this and going to the toilet to clear my head. I didn't cry. I was just mad and just tried to regain some emotional posture. When I came back to class to take my seat and just play some random music in my playlist, suddenly some girl came to me giving me a hug. I think maybe they wanted to say sorry or something. I tried to hug back, but I hear some giggling and I realized the kiss is too much, so they downgraded the dare to a hug because it's less disgusting. Well, that's just mean and unnecessary. Like, leave the guy you just ostracized out of it, you know? He's already having a bad time. When I was 22, I was dating a girl that was 21. She worked at a movie theater. She got invited to a party from people at work. Well, we go, hang out, lots of people drinking, so I think, naturally, everyone there is over 21. 18 at least. We play Truth or Dare after we all get utterly trashed, and I get dared to go into a closet with another girl. My GF is perfectly okay with it and is encouraging me to go. We go in, she's super nervous, and asks me a few questions. She says to feel more comfortable. Sure. So, what high school do you go to? What? So I ask her what she means. She says everyone there goes to her high school, but she didn't recognize me and knew that my GF liked to date, younger guys. Turns out, I was her first boyfriend that was older than her. All of her work friends were in high school too. Needless to say, I bolted out the closet, grabbed my GF and told her, what the hell? She and I broke up soon afterwards. I found out she had slept with a girl that was 16 years old at that party, while I was downstairs drinking with a bunch of minors. I haven't played Truth or Dare to this day.
Oh boy, looks like your girlfriend's a groomer.
But for real, after an experience like that, I probably wouldn't want to play Truth or Dare ever again either. As a kid, we used to play it quite often. I once had to kiss a girl I was loving in that time, and it was awesome. Next thing she got asked was who she loved. She said that she loved my best friend. I ran out of the room crying. At that moment, no one understood what was going on. I think they understood perfectly well what was going on. New Year's 2004. Ended up making out with every female at the table and nearly had sex with one, but a car crash kinda ruined it. To explain, we got a call about someone who we knew who had been in a car crash. Kinda killed the mood. Ah yes, car crashes. The number one leading cause for blue balls in males. Why, if I had a nickel for every time a car crash had stopped me from getting laid, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Best was daring someone to go over to our mutual friend who was setting up his tent and tell him it was put up wrong. Couldn't be specific in any way about what was supposed to be wrong about the way the tent was being put up, but just that it was wrong. I nearly fell out of my chair laughing when after a few minutes of being told they put their tent up wrong, they started to agree even though there was nothing wrong in the first place. I am a bigger guy than most, which makes this worse, and when I was like 14, I was dared to pole dance around an umbrella pole, and I don't want this to be so long, so let's just say that it snapped, and for the rest of the year, people called me fat. So, Pog? A girl thought it would be funny to dare me to kiss her feet for 30 seconds. As soon as I started, she started freaking out because it tickled. I was like, you said 30 seconds. So I held her foot there and continued, causing her to seriously regret her choice of dare. Later on, I dared her to run around the perimeter of the house topless. Good times were had by all. The times when I wasn't even aware of the game and people got dared to talk to me or even compliment me so they could laugh in private thinking I couldn't hear them making fun of me behind my back. School sucked for me, and that experience, among others, still heavily affects my social life and lack of social skills to this day. To the point I'm not even sure if this is a socially appropriate amount of information. Well, if it makes you feel better, at one point anyone who spent more than, a couple hours a day on the internet was basically considered socially inept at one point or another. When I play Truth or Dare, I have an oath to never do truth, so every time I went, my friends could basically make me do anything. Eventually, when I was a junior in high school, I played a particular game where it started like, do something stupid. Then things started to escalate very quickly. Once it got to me, my friends tried to do me a favor and dare me to kiss my crush. As soon as he finished, she made a disgusting face and screamed, and I mean screamed, "Ew, no!" But oh frickin' well, because the next year we started dating, then we got married. We have been happily married for 5 years. So I guess task failed successfully. Okay, I'm starting to think there's one too many people who ended up in a frickin' Truth or Dare game, kissed someone in high school, and just ended up in a long-term committed relationship. Like, it's sweet, it's nice, really, but goddamn, how common is this? Asked this girl I kinda liked for a dare. She told me she loved me. Okay, and then we started dating. Basically, over the course of 1 year, demonstrated to me in no unclear term how much she wanted to, fillet her ex. I think you know how this ends. I also set my apartment complex on fire once. She was also the first girl I ever dated. Her ex was 6'4", reportedly super charming, super smart, and, yep. Literally, you versus the guy she tells you not to worry about. And I'm sorry, did you say you set your apartment complex on fire? Like, not just the individual apartment that you lived in personally, but the whole complex? You, like, displaced families and people? Like, goddamn. How? How? One of my friends and I had been secretly dating for a couple of months. This was like 20 years ago. So one day we were playing Truth or Dare with our group of friends, and one of the girls asked him to kiss any of the girls there. He had been the crush of almost all of us for a while. Well, he begrudgingly chose me, and we kissed, but we were so used to kissing by now that we didn't notice that the kiss didn't look that innocent from the outside, and that's when everybody knew that we've been seeing each other behind their backs. When I was 18, I was at a party in South Yarra, Melbourne, Australia, and these rich douchebags who got mum and dad to give them cash dared me $50 to do a handstand on the Chapel Street tram line. I was like, I'll do it in my underpants for $200. Suddenly 200 buckaroonies was produced, and I did a failed handstand in my undies. Turns out these rich douchebags were underage, so when I got my clothes back on and I was begged by them to buy booze, I said no. I later changed my mind and gave them each an apple cider. I would also very, very, very easily take that dare for £200. Ooh, this one's for me. After this one, I swore off Truth or Dare for a few years. Back in high school, I was at a beach party, and as the night went on, the game of Truth or Dare started up. That went in exactly the direction you'd expect. There was this one girl I had been crushing on for a while, and back to back, she got dared to make out with another dude. And then she dared me to kiss probably the least attractive girl there, which was also my first kiss for bonus pain. All in all, quite a gnarly turn of events. Well, buddy, if it makes you feel better, for all you know, that ugly girl, as you called her, might have had a magical night kissing a very handsome young chap. But at the end of the day, that's the risk you take with playing Truth or Dare, because it's kind of a stupid game. Played Truth or Dare in 10th grade. My crush also joined. They dared me to confess to my crush. I accepted and said it. She said nothing and continued to play quietly. My friends wanted me to be heartbroken. Yeah, not really good friends. They asked her to answer my confession. She chose truth, and she said yes to my confession. Best moment? No. Turns out she just wanted to know if her crush was interested in her. Not a good idea, I say. I dated her for 3 months before I figured it out, and her crush didn't love her back. So, worst moment for both of us? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.